to mobilize domestic resources.
Welcome to Kigali for Ataf 2024 annual meetings.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow us to kindly please acknowledge our chief guest, the Honorable Minister Richard Tusabe, Minister of State in charge of National Treasury, Mr. Ronald Niwenshuti, the Commissioner General of the Rwanda Revenue Authority, distinguished representatives from agencies from the government of Rwanda, heads of tax administration, chairman of the Ataf Council, executive secretary of Ataf, development partner institutions and donors, the senior management of the Rwanda Revenue Authorities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the Ataf annual meetings for 2024. My name is Nozipho Shabalala, and it is an absolute privilege to serve you over the next 3 days as your co-moderator alongside my brother Romeo Nkulu Ella, as we take you through the proceedings of our forum.
Merci Nozipho. Comme vous l'avez entendu, je m'appelle Romeo Nkulu Ella. Je suis chargé des relations avec les membres et des relations extérieures au secrétariat de l'Ataf et c'est un honneur de vous accueillir à ces réunions annuelles de l'Ataf.
Merci beaucoup, Romeo. Ladies and gentlemen, our program is robust. Our program is going to create the space for us to engage intentionally and deliberately with an ever-changing global landscape that is demanding that tax authorities respond and adapt, one, to mitigate the challenges that are coming out and surfacing out of these changes, but also at the same time, unlocking the opportunities around our shared vision of sustained economic growth across the continent. And so in the program, you'll hear everything from how we might leverage digital technologies to see and drive efficiencies in tax collection. We'll talk about how we might improve data analytics so that we can really take on tax evasion and improve our abilities to detect tax fraud. We're not going to leave the border issues out of the agenda as we look to see how we might deepen cross-border cooperation. And of course, I think you heard in the video the areas around gender and how we build gender-inclusive tax policies are going to be all part of the agenda. And so we really look forward to your engagement and really welcome all the speakers and the presenters. And it gives rise, of course, to the theme, which is, of course, preparing for the future, revenue administration in a dynamic global landscape.
Mesdames et messieurs, comme vous l'avez entendu, nous avons un menu très nanti et je voudrais vous inviter à le consommer sans modération. Mais avant de commencer, nous avons quelques annonces à faire pour s'assurer que tout le monde puisse suivre la réunion dans la langue de son choix. Nous avons prévu des services d'interprétation dans les 3 langues officielles de l'Ataf. Si vous êtes anglophone, pour accéder à l'interprétation, sélectionnez le canal 1. Si vous êtes francophone, sélectionnez le canal 2. Et si vous êtes lusophone, sélectionnez le canal 3. C'est très important d'avoir vos écouteurs près de vous parce que nous aurons des orateurs de background linguistique différents. Donc, assurez-vous d'avoir votre interprétation prête. Et également, je voudrais indiquer que nous avons créé une application à l'occasion de cette Assemblée générale ou de ces réunions annuelles. Et vous voyez ici le code QR qui est en train de s'afficher à l'écran. Tout ce que vous avez à faire, c'est prendre votre téléphone, scanner ce code et ça va vous emmener à la page où vous allez télécharger l'application. Là-dedans, vous aurez le programme mis à jour. Tous les changements que nous allons faire tout au long de la réunion seront mis à jour sur l'application. Vous aurez des informations sur les orateurs, les intervenants et vous pourrez également même évaluer la qualité de la réunion et des intervenants.
Thank you very much, Romy. Allow me just to repeat on the different channels. English is on channel 1, French on channel 2, and Portuguese on channel 3. Before we call up our first speaker, allow me just to make the final of our housekeeping announcements, starting off by inviting you to please take recognition of where your nearest exits are. They are on either side of this plenary. In the event of an emergency, please use those exit doors, but please be informed that there will be ushers to assist you should the need arise. We also have a first aid medical van that is situated just outside of the building. If anyone needs medical assistance, no matter how minor, that service has been made available to you. And the ushers are also on standby for any requests that you might have. The final thing, Romeo, I hope a few people are going to take this up, is there is a travel desk that has been located just outside the plenary hall. And so if you want to make the most of your time here in Kigali, you are more than welcome to book directly with the travel guest and really begin to see the city and even beyond. And with that, Romeo, I believe that we are ready for our first session. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be inviting our dignitaries who are going to be extending opening remarks to kick us off this morning. And of course, we are also going to receive a keynote address from our chief guest, the Honorable Minister. And so as Romeo and I descend the stage, allow me to please welcome to the podium Mr. Ronald Newenshuti, the Commissioner General of the RRA. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Honorable Minister of State for National Treasury and our chief guest today, Chairman, Ataf Council, Ataf Executive Secretary, Mr. Logan Walt, dear Commissioner Generals, Director Generals, heads of delegations, development partners that are with us today, representatives from our government institutions, friends, colleagues, and if anyone has been not mentioned here, all protocols observed. Please allow me to welcome you all to our beautiful country, we normally call 1,000 hills and 1,000,000 smiles. It is always humbling to meet you all, especially when we are talking about growing and securing revenue for Africa. Not so long ago, revenue administrations across Africa gathered here in Kigali to discuss the opportunities that technology presents for the enhancement of value-added tax compliance on the continent. This time, we have gathered for this event under the theme, Preparing for the Future, Revenue Administration in a Dynamic Global Landscape. This is a very bold theme and compels us to critically think about solutions for the future because the sand beneath us, our feet, is moving very fast and we need to move on and adapt to the global evolving landscape. I would like to wholeheartedly express my appreciation to the African Tax Administration Forum for organizing this annual event and trusting Rwanda Revenue Authority to be the host. We are honored and humbled. Thank you, Ataf Secretary General, or Ataf Executive Secretary, for coordinating our efforts geared towards improving tax administration in Africa. It is through your guidance and leadership that today Ataf is making 15 years and has continued to provide expertise to member countries in confronting taxation challenges that face Africa. Once again, let's say congratulations to Ataf for the 15 years. Ladies and gentlemen, The evolving global landscape has presented us with new challenges and opportunities. It is therefore appropriate and correct that as tax administrators, we are taking a leading role to face the global taxation challenges and also take advantage of the opportunities that come with it. The reason is simple. We are the hope of our respective countries to raise the much-needed revenues for the betterment of our citizens. I therefore make a special plea to critically analyze the global challenges for contemporary solutions as we are here. A moment like this gives us an opportunity to once again recommit our support to Ataf, forge a unified front, share experience, success stories in different areas of our policy, technology, the global taxation, artificial intelligence, as mentioned in our video, and the data analytics, among others. We will achieve the above if we implement structured development programs for our tax administrations. The skill set within our respective tax administration need to be consistently enhanced if we were to remain relevant as tax administrators. I have seen the Ataf agenda, and I assure you, as usual, the Ataf Secretariat has proposed game-changing topics that require us all to apply our minds and contribute to the ideas as well as solutions. I am confident that during this annual meeting, we will discuss very good progress and also target new waves that we can ride on to enhance our progress. Fellow tax administrators, despite the economic challenges we had positive and encouraging revenue performance as reported in the Ataf publication of 2023, the African Tax Outlook. In the year under review, the ATO revenue collections rebounded to a significant growth of 20.9% in 2022 compared to what was projected in 2021 to be 16.3, exceeding the long-term average percentage. The average tax to GDP ratio was recorded as 15.43% in 2022 from 14.80 in 2021. A total of 24 African countries, that is 69%, recorded an increase in their ratios when compared to 2021, with most benefiting from domestic tax collections. The road ahead is very rocky and long if we were to compare ourselves to the more developed countries that today register tax to GDP of 33.9% in 2023. However, the above statistics is a testament that if we put our heads together, we will need to change the narrative and build the African tax solution for the African tax challenges. I'm glad to share that Rwanda has embraced technology in most of our services. In the tax administration, we ensured that our tax modernization agenda is powered by technology from onset in the most of our processes. We also started the implementation of e-invoicing solution in 2013 with the purpose of overcoming inefficiencies associated with VAT manual administration. Rwanda has also built capabilities in areas of international taxation, data science, data analytics, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot end my remarks without briefly talking about the domestic resource mobilization that has made us gather here today. The pressure is mounting for Africa to successfully mobilize her resources for sustainable growth and development. We play a critical role as tax administrators in that we are trusted to find ways to increase the revenue performance of our tax administrations. We need to work hard to ensure that all those that are required to pay tax do so. We need to seriously deal with non-compliance amongst our taxpayers categories. We need to expand our tax base. we need to strengthen the efficiency of our tax administrations. As we do all this, we need to embrace technology and use it to build smart tax administrations. Lastly, allow me to recognize the 15 years of Ataf and re-emphasize our privilege to have heads of tax administrations and stakeholders aligned on revenue mobilization for the socio-economic development of Africa. I look forward to the fruitful discussions that we shall have during this time here. You are most welcome to enjoy the good experience of Rwanda. Please do take off some time within these 2 stressful days and spend some coins to contribute to our VAT. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner General. And to paraphrase some of the language you've shared with us, the sand beneath our feet is shifting. And this moment is a critical moment that calls on us to be equally critical in analyzing the global financial architecture and doing so from a perspective that is unapologetic about what Africa wants and needs. Thank you very much for those insights. And of course, the call to action to please contribute to VAT while we're still here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I also do want to acknowledge joining us virtually, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, representing the African Union Commission. A big welcome to you as well, Your Excellency. We look forward to your contribution in the conversations. I'd like to welcome at this point to the podium the Executive Secretary of ATAF, the African Tax Administration Forum. Please put your hands together for Mr. Logan Watt.
When the podium is high, I often wonder if you can see me. However, I'm sure you can hear me. Excellencies, Honorable Richard Tusabe, Minister of State in charge of National Treasury, Dr. Philip Chodi, Chairman of the ATAF Council, Ambassador Albert Muchanga, Chairman of the Commission at the African Union, members of the ATAF Council, members of ATAF Directors General, our development partners, our special guests, and please allow me to acknowledge from here Mr. Gershom Pasi, former Commissioner General of Zimbabwe Revenue Authority and former Chair of the ATAF Council, and Mr. Kenilwe Morris, former Commissioner General of the Botswana Unified Revenue Service and former member of the ATAF Council, who are our special guest at this 15 years today. Friends and colleagues, good morning. It is great to see all of you coming from various parts of the continent and from other parts of the world. We are privileged to have you here with us this week, and it gives us great pleasure to welcome you all to this, our annual meetings, which is hosted by the Rwanda Revenue Authority. And the Rwanda Revenue Authority has been a long-standing and founding member and strong supporter of the work of ATAF. And for this, I wish to say a special thank you to Commissioner General Ronald Neoshuti and the government and the Republic of Rwanda for welcoming us to your beautiful country of 1,000 hills and 1,000 smiles. For me, personally, it is a very special moment to be here in front of you as I come to the end of my term as Executive Secretary of ATAF. In a few months' time, I will be vacating that position as the organization pursues our efforts to appoint a new Executive Secretary. This is a position that I have had for 15 years now, since the exception of Ataf, and you will agree with me, it's time to go. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the obvious challenges of establishing a new organization, this journey has been incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. To see an idea of amongst revenue administrations in 2008, to form a community of tax administrations, to see it unfold and turn into a leading African organization, and now a global player in tax dialogue and in the fight for the allocation of fair taxing rights around the world is incredibly rewarding. And I'd like to congratulate you, the members, for building such an incredible organization. In the next session, we will talk a little bit more and reflect on this 15 years. But this year's theme of our annual meetings is preparing for the future, revenue administration in a dynamic global landscape. And this theme is envisioned to enable us to reflect, discuss, and agree on practical strategies that tax administration should embrace to ensure that they adapt to the challenges and opportunities of the digital age and the emerging global issues, including the debt crisis in many African countries, the geopolitical conflicts and tensions, the changing political landscape, the considerations for enhancing equality and fairness in tax systems around the world, the need to promote gender equality, climate and environmental considerations, and the shift in the global tax governance within the United Nations that are now playing out. These pertinent discussions are coming at a time when it is clear that the continent faces significant gaps to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Africa Agenda 2063. According to the United Nations 2024 report on financing for sustainable development, financing gap for developing countries have increased to about $4 trillion every year. And the African Economic Outlook of the African Development Bank has the African financing gap estimated as $402 billion. That is huge, and it's a huge responsibility on the domestic revenue mobilization side. So addressing these financing gaps requires a concerted effort in enhancing domestic resource mobilization, our capacities within African countries, in, amongst other things, embracing technology and digital solutions for enhancing our efficiency and our effectiveness in tax administration. The need to address illicit financial flows and enhancing productivity in African countries and the promotion of intra-African government investment. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement must succeed for intra-African investment and trade to succeed. Ataf continues to invest heavily on how to address these challenges, especially the enhancement of domestic resource mobilization in addressing illicit financial flows. And in this, we work with other Pan-African organizations to advocate for more effective and sustainable ways of financing development during the 4th Financing and Development Conference 2025. While some progress has been made in enhancing tax systems on the continent, African countries continue to report low GDP figures. And during the conference, we will hear some of those figures, including the fact that average tax to GDP ratio in the countries that Ataf has surveyed in our African tax outlook is established to be at about 14.43%, far below the 34.1% experienced in OECD countries. Ladies and gentlemen, it is evident that we need to work together to enhance domestic resource mobilization. We must embrace technology, digital solutions in tax administrations, and this is central to achieving our objectives. This, together with targeted strategies for base expansion, effective views of exchange of information and transparency, and sustained capacity building on transfer pricing and international tax is central to all of this. Technology and digital is central to achieving this, our ability to have revenue, statistics, and data analysis. For example, here in Rwanda, the tax administration has been a pioneer for adopting an electronic invoicing system and have reported to us that over the last 5 years, the VAT and income tax collection has grown, has shown a growth of about 51.6% and 94.3% respectively, digital and electronic. South Africa too has significantly invested in technology, and we have seen the growth in the South African revenue base. Ladies and gentlemen, the adoption of technology has a far-reaching implication, and it can significantly support targeted approaches to revenue collection, especially targeting high net worth individuals, politically connected persons, and those hard to tax areas. Let me conclude. These and other pressing revenue mobilization matters are what we're going to deal with over the next 3 days. And I'd like to invite you to vigorously participate and debate these issues. So welcome to our annual meetings here in Kigali, and thank you to you, our member countries, present here today for your consistent and loyal support to Ataf as an organization. As we in Ataf, in the Council and in the Secretariat, do our best to serve you as we go forward to build a better Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to the Executive Secretary of Ataf, Mr. Logan Ward, and in particular, Mr. Ward, for encouraging us to really go to the hard areas in the conversations, leaving absolutely no stone unturned, and cognizant that there are no sacred cows that cannot be debated over the next 3 days. And I think all of us in the room are hearing that invitation loud and clear to step into the arena and truly engage. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure at this moment now to invite Dr. Philippe Chaudier, the chairman of the Ataf Council and Commissioner General of the Office Togolais de Recettes. Let's give him a big round of applause, please.
Merci. Je vais délivrer mes remarques en français. Donc, je prierai à ceux qui peuvent s'aider de leur dispositif. C'est toujours un plaisir de revenir au Rwanda, ici même dans ce pays que j'ai eu l'honneur de servir il y a déjà quelques années. Et mon nom rwandais était Musinga. Pour ceux qui connaissent un peu l'histoire. Ceci pour commencer, je voudrais, Monsieur honorable ministre d'État, chargé du Trésor national, Monsieur le commissaire des affaires économiques de l'Union africaine, Mesdames, Messieurs les commissaires, directeurs généraux, directeurs généraux, Monsieur le secrétaire exécutif de l'Ataf, Mesdames, Messieurs les représentants des différentes institutions et agences ici présentes, Mesdames, Messieurs les représentants des partenaires techniques et financiers, chers membres du personnel du secrétariat de l'Ataf, distingués invités à vos titres, grades et tout protocole respecté, Mesdames et Messieurs. C'est un honneur et un privilège de vous accueillir aujourd'hui à l'occasion de ces réunions annuelles 2024 de l'Ataf. Votre présence massive dans cette salle témoigne de votre engagement indéfectible en faveur de la promotion des systèmes fiscaux modernes, efficaces et inclusifs. Je voudrais profiter de l'occasion pour présenter solennellement à M. Ronald Niwenzouti mes chaleureuses félicitations pour sa brillante nomination à la tête de Rwanda Revenue Authority en qualité de commissaire général. J'ai à cette occasion pour remercier les premières autorités rwandaises pour avoir accepté d'abriter ce grand événement de l'Ataf et aussi féliciter pour l'hospitalité dont chaque délégation a fait l'objet depuis leur séjour dans ce beau pays de 1000 collines. Aujourd'hui, l'Ataf est un acteur central et incontournable des questions fiscales, non seulement en Afrique, mais également à l'échelle internationale. Ce succès, nous le devons à une collaboration remarquable entre le Conseil, le secrétariat exécutif, sous, bien sûr, ma supervision et sous la direction éclairée du secrétaire exécutif, M. Logan Wolf, et de nos administrations fiscales membres. Notre dévouement et notre vision ont tracé le chemin vers l'avenir fiscal plus équitable, durable pour notre continent. En dépit de ces succès, notre rôle en tant qu'administration fiscale dans la mobilisation des ressources intérieures est plus que jamais crucial au financement des aspirations de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine et des objectifs de développement durable de l'ONU à l'horizon 2030. Cependant, les défis sont immenses. Le poids croissant de la dette publique, aggravé par les crises mondiales successives, des tensions régionales et le terrorisme pour certains pays, met en lumière l'urgence d'assurer la viabilité budgétaire de nos économies. De plus, selon le FMI, le ratio dette sur le PIB moyen en Afrique est passé de 40% en 2010 à 65% en 2023. De nombreux pays sur le continent enregistrent des niveaux critiques de ratio dette sur produit intérieur brut entre 80 et 120%. Ces chiffres illustrent l'importance du renforcement de la mobilisation des recettes fiscales nationales tout en adoptant des politiques transparentes et responsables. Oui, nous avons encore des défis importants à relever, mais les signaux positifs ne manquent pas. Le dernier rapport de PEFA montre une augmentation des ratios impôts PIB dans 24 pays africains en 2023, grâce notamment à l'amélioration des recettes fiscales nationales. Cette dynamique encourageante appelle à redoubler d'efforts pour la modernisation des administrations fiscales et répondre aux exigences d'une économie globalisée et digitalisée. Les transformations économiques actuelles, telles que la digitalisation, la mondialisation, les changements climatiques et les pressions liées aux conflits géopolitiques, imposent à nos administrations fiscales de s'adapter très rapidement. Nous devons également répondre aux attentes de nos concitoyens qui exigent une meilleure gouvernance dans la gestion des ressources publiques et une réduction des comptes publics. Au vu de tout cela, quelles sont les priorités de notre avenir? Premièrement, l'avenir de nos administrations fiscales repose sur l'adoption accrue des technologies modernes. La science des données, l'intelligence artificielle et l'analyse avancée des données sont des outils essentiels pour l'amélioration de l'efficacité de nos systèmes fiscaux, renforcer les cadres d'évaluation des risques et favoriser une meilleure conformité des contribuables. Deuxièmement, la collaboration entre pays africains est cruciale. L'Ataf reste une plateforme stratégique pour promouvoir des solutions adaptées aux réalités africaines. Nous devons encourager les échanges entre pairs et exploiter pleinement le potentiel de l'Ataf pour le développement des solutions africaines par les Africains et pour les Africains. Autrement dit, il s'agit de promouvoir la coopération sud-sud que je souhaite pour nos États. Troisièmement, nous devons intensifier les échanges intra-africains sur les questions fiscales en mettant en œuvre les réformes nécessaires et en adoptant des investissements tels que l'accord de l'Ataf sur l'assistance mutuelle en matière fiscale. Quatrièmement, il est impératif de développer des politiques fiscales inclusives et équitables. La taxation de l'économie numérique, des acteurs informels et des individus fortunés doivent être guidés par des données fiables. Par ailleurs, la gouvernance et la responsabilité publique doivent accompagner toute réforme fiscale pour garantir l'adhésion et la confiance des concitoyens. Cinquièmement, en matière de genre, nos politiques fiscales doivent refléter un engagement ferme envers l'égalité. L'Ataf a pris des devants en intégrant une perspective de genre dans la conception des politiques fiscales et je vous invite à poursuivre sur cette voie. Il est évident que le monde dans lequel nous opérons évolue très rapidement et nos systèmes fiscaux doivent évoluer encore plus vite. Ces réunions annuelles offrent donc pour nous une opportunité unique de réflexion collective et de partage d'expériences. Ensemble, nous pouvons accélérer les réformes en cours et celles envisagées, surpasser nos objectifs et bâtir des économies plus solides et plus équitables. C'est sur ce mot que je souhaite à tous et à toutes des fructueuses délibérations. Que l'Éternel bénisse nos travaux. Je vous remercie.
A very big thank you to the chairman of the Ataf Council. Let's give him another round of applause, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chair, for bringing us to the focused area of asking the questions, where do we start? Where do we put our energies around priorities? And to that extensive list that you've shared, but a list that really speaks to the reality of the ground that tax administration authorities need to respond to. An integration and leveraging of technology, South-South cooperation, inclusive and equitable policy, data-driven policy reforms, making sure that we don't leave citizens behind, and of course, making sure that we center women in gender policy, tax policy that really speaks to the ambitions of creating more equal societies. Ladies and gentlemen, that now leaves for our opening session our keynote speaker, who will now come to the podium to deliver the keynote. And so I'm going to invite you to please allow him to come with a really warm round of applause. The Honorable Minister Richard Tusabe. Let's give.
Excellencies, Director Generals, Commissioner Generals, Ataf members, Ataf leadership, development partners, friends and colleagues, good morning. The Commissioner General's welcoming remarks to welcome you to Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills. I hope you've received very good hospitality. It's my great honor and privilege to address this distinguished gathering. Today, we come together to discuss taxation matters and reaffirm our collective commitment systems that drive development. As a founding member of African Tax Administration, Rwanda has benefited greatly from its collaborative programs over the past decade. Ataf has provided critical capacity building initiatives, including technical training for tax administrators, knowledge sharing forums, and assistance in designing progressive tax policy. Include workshops on transfer pricing, VAT administration, and the use of digital technologies to enhance tax compliance. These engagements have strengthened Rwanda's institutional capacity and enabled us to build a strong and effective tax administration. It is therefore fitting for all of us as the Ataf members, along with the 43 other member countries, to wish Ataf a happy 15 years. The journey of reaching this milestone has brought success and innovation to tax administration and reshaped the global conversation on tax. When you talk of 15 years, is it a lot? Is it too little? I think in my view, it depends on what we've managed to achieve. In 15 years journey, I think Ataf has given us more than what we expected. And I really want to congratulate Ataf. As global changes occur, I think the previous speakers tried to talk about what is happening in the global landscape, the geopolitics, the climate change, but most specifically for Africa, I think we also have our structural challenges. We believe that initiatives like establishment of the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, it is vital to have organizations such as Ataf champion the African voice. Furthermore, we remain committed to supporting Ataf's activities, including prioritizing financing for development through domestic resources mobilization at the 4th Financing for Development Conference in 2025. Like most of our respective countries, Rwanda has made remarkable progress in strengthening its domestic revenue mobilization over the years. And thanks to Ataf for being part of this journey and support. Our nation has focused on improving the efficiency and equity of our tax system, to support our ambitious development goals as outlined in National Strategy for Transformation 1, and also National Strategy for Transformation 2 that we will be coming out in a few months to come. We recognize that sustainable growth hinges on our ability to generate domestic resources to fund essential public services, build critical infrastructure, and reduce reliance on external financing. Speaking for Rwanda, which more or less mirrors what happens in our respective countries, the financing landscape has changed globally because of what has been spoken about in terms of geopolitics and the global shocks that are happening one after the other. Largely, the financing that has been coming to our respective countries from the global partners is more or less, it has been reducing steadily, and I think within no time it might even dry up. So our only hope comes back to the taxman. I think the taxman has not been more important than this time. How do we design competitive tax systems? How do we design policies that are speaking to our structural challenges, hence support our development ambitions in a world that is becoming more selfish? That's the reality. Today, speaking of for Africa, I think most of the structural challenges we have, our demographics, is one of the biggest challenges. Our biggest percentage of population, maybe some countries have even as much as 60 to 70% of the population being youth. And that youth is looking for jobs. So how do we design policies that are going to create jobs for our people? Number two, I don't know, maybe some of us are lucky, but you might find that all of us in the room, if you ask in a country, we are all net importers. And surprisingly, some of the big products that we import in our respective countries, it is food. So food security with a growing population that is young, you cannot afford to ignore those challenges. And the best way to be proactive is to work with a very strong tax system that will grow along with the respective sectors that we speak to our structural challenges. Like most of us, Rwanda has been on the forefront of leveraging technology for better access to information and systems and optimizing fourth industrial revolution. It is important to remember this when we're looking at the potential revenue this sector has for continent as a whole. With the most recent African fintech industry survey shows that the market is largest segment with digital payments with a total transaction of about 4.4 billion in 2020. Definitely that figure has grown over the years. We've made significant progress in terms of internet penetration and broadband. And it is your role as tax administrator to ensure that we have visibility of the data. How do we use that data for revenue purposes? Of course, working hand in hand with the respective ministries of finance to work on the right policies and the right regulatory framework that will capture and make use of that data, especially tapping into the e-commerce. Therefore, this should trigger increased digital transactions that should in turn deflect into increased revenue from taxing the digital economy. Again, something that we share mostly, the level of informal sector. Most of our economy, still the informal sector is the biggest percentage. But with the visibility of big data and analytics and the taxman doing what he's supposed to do to ensure that we have visibility of what is happening in the economy, we can greatly reduce the level of informality. But reduce the level of informality by incentivizing even people to come and act in the formal sector. So how do we use the tax system to ease and create hope from people acting in the informal sector to come and play in the formal sector? So the compliance burden has to be measured as we walk that journey of moving from informal sector to formal sector. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have taken advantage of the region's and country's strong economic growth. Domestically, we have prioritized reforms to simplify compliance, expand the tax base, and reduce the tax burden on low-income earners while ensuring fairness through initiatives such as the rollout of digital tax systems, improved taxpayer education, and strengthened enforcement. As a country, we have been proactive, mainly on the legal and regulatory landscape, in implementing relevant legislations to protect our tax base and tap into the benefits of digitization. A host of tax rules for cross-border transactions have been introduced since 2020, with the recent law being introduced in October 2022. And the new rules align with international standards and will ensure that taxpayers have seamless and well-aligned international tax rules, which generally applies to their business across the globe. Additionally, the new rules enhance the capacity of the country to generate revenue sources from activities of multinational enterprises operating in the country as they seek to fill existing gaps while creating opportunities for taxpayers to engage the tax administration for advanced pricing arrangements, which may provide certainty to businesses operating in the country based on Ataf's suggested approach to drafting permanent establishment registration. A robust dependent agent permanent establishment rule has now been introduced in Rwanda. And in addition, in line with protecting the tax base and ensuring revenue collection, the Ataf team also assisted with introducing a law to address the indirect transfer of shares for capital gains. We have done this with the support of partners like Ataf. It includes, but it isn't limited to, transfer pricing legislation, automatic exchange of information legislation, anti-abuse regulations, permanent establishment regulations, and many more. As we look ahead, let me emphasize the importance of trust in our tax systems. Taxation is not merely a technical exercise, but a social contract between governments and the citizens that we serve in our respective countries. Strengthening this contract requires what we know most: transparency, accountability, and a commitment to using public resources efficiently and effectively. I think the chairman talked about the fiscal burden and the debt levels that we all have on our balance sheet. And this has damaged our macroeconomic fundamentals. With shaky macroeconomic fundamentals, with a growing population, with climate change pressure, with global geopolitics, of which Africa is most on the receiving end, even when it is not the initiator, I think it is time to really focus and design the right tax systems that can respond to our respective challenges. The global shocks are coming all the time. We don't control them. The structural issues that I mentioned, they are still rampant in our countries. So it's very important that we we try to position Africa to ensure that we become efficient and leverage on the opportunities that we have. It is very painful that whenever we talk about Africa development, we end up talking about opportunities. And to a great extent, also it is depressing that generations talk about opportunities and potential without really realizing these potentials. But knowing what is happening globally, I think it is our time to turn those opportunities and that potential into a reality. And there's no better way of doing it without a partner like Ataf and also tax administrators in the room. So I really want to encourage all of us here today to exchange ideas, share the best practices, which we are not short of. We are not short of best practices. We know what is required. But again, we are mindful of the fact that the administrators, tax administrators cannot achieve a lot without the policymakers, without creating the right legal and regulatory environment. So the ministers of finance have to be on the forefront and work with you this journey. And on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I really want to make this commitment that we are behind you, we are going to support you, we are going to work together to leverage on the expertise that we bring on the table in this meeting to explore new innovation solutions to address the challenges that we have. Together, we can create tax systems that are not only effective, but also equitable, ensuring that no one is left behind. But again, creating a tax system that is competitive and sustainable, that is moving with the global shifts. But this time around, I want also to be selfish as an African and say, can you create systems that are selfish for our people, that are going to create jobs, that are going to address climate change, that are going to ensure that we get a fair share of what is produced within our respective countries, to ensure that this time around we focus on value addition. I think the global shocks, one of the global shocks that has really, I'm not going to educate you about this, I'm sure you've experienced it. The time of COVID, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the others that have happened. The biggest message that you learn from these shocks is how best can you shorten your supply chains. If you're going to be relying on a country that is 3 months away using the sea route to get your product, we've witnessed this, where countries say, no, we're not exporting, we've frozen the exports. You're at a critical moment when you need a product, and the country is saying we've frozen exports. But as a continent, we've opened and relied on these products to be imported in our countries. So why can't we start really producing in the continent and support with SFTA initiative to say, how can we trade among ourselves? How can we reduce the import bill on the continent? How can we protect our currencies? Hence, fiscal sustainability. Hence, sustainable development. So I really want to emphasize the importance of the macroeconomic importance of tax systems. The fiscal capacity comes with a very strong tax system, hence a strong tax administration. Let me conclude by reaffirming Rwanda's commitment to advancing tax reforms domestically and supporting international efforts for greater cooperation. By working together, which we've done in the last 15 years, thank you to Ataf again, congratulations, we can build resilient economies that deliver for our people and foster sustainable development while addressing our structural challenges as a continent. With those few remarks, I really thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the outcome of these few days meeting and see what is on the menu in the outcome for the policymaker to run with, and I can promise you I'll take that as my priority to ensure that it gets implemented. I thank you.
Honorable Minister Tsusabe, thank you very much for a deeply insightful keynote address, highlighting once again the reality of African economies and the informality, and that we cannot talk about efficient taxation without talking about the compliance journey towards formalization and the role of taxation in doing that. But more than anything, thank you for reminding us that taxation is essentially about trust. It is about bringing to life the social contract between those that govern and those that are governed. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our opening ceremony. Can I ask you to please give a warm round of applause for all our speakers? Thank you very much. We are now going to steep ourselves in tradition by taking the time to go and very quickly take our group photograph. I'm going to invite my sister Chipo, who is going to lead our dignitaries to the banner outside where they will take their photograph. I'm also going to ask that the rest of us, using the door at the back, begin to go to the outside section, and the ushers are standing by where the group photograph is going to be taken. Those who are participating in the media briefing, I believe you know who you are, and the venue is MH3. And ladies and gentlemen, may I please just make this final request. Once we are done with our group photograph, we have something very special to celebrate. We've heard it being referenced a few times this morning. That's Ataf at 15. So the request is to kindly please make our way promptly back into the room. We have a session on Ataf at 15 that is going to kick off immediately after the group photograph on the outside. So thank you very much. Our dignitaries, you are invited to exit through the front, and the rest of us will exit through the back as we take our positions for the larger photograph. Thank you so very much.
Reflections about Ataf at 15. It is our 15th birthday, and so it is. We always use this time to celebrate these milestones, but also to reflect on what we have been able to do and what we see ourselves doing in the future. So this session is going to be more than a commemoration. It is also an opportunity to reflect. And we thought that nobody else would reflect better than the people who have been at the helm of the organization in different roles, both in the past and in the present. It will also be an opportunity to recognize every one of you who has walked this journey with Ataf. Because Ataf has actually ceased to be just an organization that is really trying to effectively help tax administrations, but it has morphed into an organization that even influences tax policy. And because of this, we've had an interaction with almost every sphere in life, on the continent and beyond. So Ataf has actually become a family that tries to raise revenue in the different tax administrations with a specific target of national development. And so I want to say that it was difficult for us as the organizers to really come up with this panel, because everybody we could think of, we wanted to put on the panel. And then we realized that it wasn't elastic. So we chose a group that we think will reflect the journey of Ataf, the present and the past, and then together we also look at the future. So the way we run this panel is that we will have a presentation from none other than Mr. Watt. Mr. Watt is the Executive Secretary of the African Tax Administration, like he said, for the last 15 years. And he's had the singular role of being at the helm and steering the successful reports that you had earlier today about Ataf. Through the challenges, through the difficulties, and through the successes. And he built a culture of agility, where with very little resources, we have been able to respond to the different countries. So Mr. Watt will be taking us through a presentation, and then I will introduce each panelist as they come, and then we can have a conversation. We'll leave some time for a Q&A. I want to know from my colleagues if Madame Kajina has already joined, because we're supposed to be joined by Madame Kajina as well. Can I get an indication of that, please? All right, thank you. So Madame Kajina is here. And without further ado, welcome, Alan. It's a pleasure to see you. I want to welcome Mr. Watt so that he can take us through an introduction to this session. Mr. Watt. Yes. No, please, you can speak from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a lot better. Are we having a video? Okay, thank you. You need to remember 2008 subprime crisis, the global financial crisis. Markets were severely depressed. Governments around the world had to bail out financial institutions, and so the budgets in the big economies did no longer allow for the type of support it was giving to developing countries. And so Ataf was formed at a time when there was huge pressure on African economies. So for me, the timing was perfect.
An idea was brought about having an organization that would help the different tax administrations build their capacity. It was a small secretariat, but if you looked at the work that the secretariat did, it was way beyond anybody's expectations.
By 2009, we could participate as Ataf, as a young organization, already in mobilizing increased revenue for a number of our member countries. So the timing was good.
Ataf means a lot to me. I don't see Ataf as an employer. I look at my work as a calling. I look at it as an opportunity to be able to help countries collect revenue that can then improve the lives of its citizens.
What is the essence of taxation? And what is the connection between taxation and the value proposition of governments? The meeting eventually decided not to establish an OECD tax center. Instead, to form a tax organization for Africa. And that is how Ataf was born.
Thank you. I think that that was a trailer. There's a longer version you can get. But looking at that, I don't know what all went through my mind, because I see Madame Ellen Kajina there on the screen, and some of the people here in front you saw on the video. And then I see people in the audience, Pavina, I see Femi Edgar, there were people who walked with us this road. Laila from Morocco walked with us this road. And they asked me to speak to you for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, just to tell you about the journey. And it's really difficult to do that because I'm going to get it wrong. There's witnesses here. But starting a tax organization for Africa was an incredible journey. the question was, how do you do this? And how do you give the responsibility to somebody who's not worked in tax before? And I want to start by saying that we built a tax organization with the knowledge and the experience on the shoulders of great leaders of African tax, some of them sitting here. Gershom Pashi was our second chair of the council. Alan Kajina and Mary Baini here were our founder members when we decided to form this organization. The short version, why a tax organization? Because Africa needed to mobilize its own resources. But who would join an African tax body? Does Africa have a history of successful multilateral organization? Do we have a history of successful collaboration between French and English and Portuguese-speaking countries? Our track record wasn't very good. We were a small, upstart little 5-person outfit in the South African Revenue Service who had to embark on a journey supported by 9 African tax commissioners general on a steering committee that said, go and establish this organization. But we had to gain the confidence of African countries. We had to gain the confidence of ministers of finance. We had to gain the confidence of commissioners general, but we had no track record. We had no credibility. We had to get buy-in. So how did we start to do this? And part of the conversation we had was, we can't just go, and this is not just about tax collection. We had to understand what is the ideology. And the ideology, personally, for the part of my journey, was influenced to a large extent by the concept of the social contract between citizens and the state. And by the theory, and Professor Mick Moore was very influential in my thinking, of taxation and state building, to understand that tax collection and revenue collection is not a bureaucratic process of collection, but it's an act of development, of making sure that the African girl child has education. And so that ideology was important to understand in the beginning of establishing Ataf. The strive for better life for Africans. So below that strategy, we had to do work. We can't just dream and blame others for the fact that we don't have money, colonialism, and the stuff that we normally say. So the methodology was, how do we create a track record? How do we get credibility? How do we get people to want to join an organization like Ataf? We had to build value immediately. And so, as Alan Kajina, who hosted the launch of Ataf, will tell you, by the time we launched Ataf in 2009 in November, I hope, we already had 11 training programs attended by 27 African countries. And we were not even launched yet. Because we knew that we had to get confidence, we had to produce value, and we had to have activities driven by us. And thanks to the support, actually from the OECD at the time, it was incredible because we did not have experts, we did not know anybody. They provided those experts, and African countries responded. We had to also understand what is the world of domestic resource mobilization and taxation. What is it that we need to do to drive tax policy reform, better tax collection and administration, and the investment therein? And you know what we discovered? That the world of tax standards and planning and tax conversations was happening in Europe. It was happening at the OECD. It was happening through programs in Germany, programs at the IMF and World Bank. And we discovered that that is where our leaders were going. And that is whom they were listening to. They were not really had the confidence to listen to people here on the continent. We took a very conscious decision to spend a lot of our initial time understanding these organizations, how they work, forging partnerships with them, and often through them and through our development partners, were we able to get inroads, acceptance, and an audience with our own leaders. Often not directly through being an African organization, because we did not have a track record. And so the role of our partners, and a lot of our partners are here, those who financed the initial part of the organization, who invested in an idea even though it didn't exist. Those were the path to our success. Then there were the country correspondents, a lot of them in this meeting here today. The Ataf country correspondents, Mary, was the anchor to the success. Today you will see that 80% of Ataf activities are directed directly towards member improvement. And that link to our members is our country correspondents, and they help build this organization. And then there's the leaders, the commissioners general who will speak here, who guided people like myself, Vasha Singh, Lincoln Mare, people like Femi Edgal and others came later, soon after, guided us as to how to build this organization, dealt with the problems and the intricacies and challenges of building an African organization, because we fight and we argue and we want to host and we want to own and we want to argue about language and we want to argue about who's the leader. These people helped me. They helped us with these things. And those are the shoulders upon which we built this. Let me then quickly say there are two other people in this meeting here that I have to single out in this journey. Ben Dickinson and Richard Perry are two people who worked in the OECD. And in the first 5 years of our existence, they were the anchor of the values that we have created. And I'd really like to acknowledge them for their contribution to the work of Ataf. Now, lastly, the thing that makes it work for us in this journey and that makes me reflect a lot is the fact that a key part of Ataf's success has been our ability to innovate all of the time. This may sound political, but one of the advantages of being African and about being black is that you have to prove yourself all the time. I don't know if you feel that, I feel that. And so you kind of have to be the best, you kind of have to innovate, you kind of have to come up with new ideas all the time. And so what did we do? We established the African Tax Research Network before everybody else had it, and now there's tax research network everywhere. We established the Women in Tax Network. Now there's women in tax networks everywhere. We established the African Tax Outlook. We developed an executive master's in taxation, 85 graduates in French and English, innovation all the time. We developed an African agreement on tax matters. And that, colleagues, must continue to be the success of Ataf. Products, innovation, and impact. And through all of this, we can show in the bank quite a few billions of US dollars collected through technical programs, training, and our technical committees, all delivered not by me, not by the council, but by the members of our tax authority. So it's been an incredible journey, Mary. And as we go into the next 15 years, digital, innovation, our relationship with our partners, but more importantly, investing financially ourselves into the success of Ataf of the future. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watt. When you started, you were worried that the witnesses around would have a different opinion from you in terms of some of these things. So witness number one here, who's me, says you have gotten it right. So thank you. I wanted to say that some of the issues that you talked about actually, I think, have reflected the uniqueness of Ataf. You talked about the methodology, providing value immediately, and the fact that Ataf has always been member-centric. And you also talked about the leadership that we got from the revenue administrations, because they actually give the direction of where we should go and what kind of support that we provide, meaning that we then have, Ataf then provides support that is fit for purpose on the continent. I want, with this in mind, I want to move to my next speaker, who is Dr. Philippe Chodie, who is also the Commissioner General of Office Togolese de Recettes and the current chairman of the Ataf Council. Dr. Chodie, you heard what Mr. Ward said, and you have been at the helm of Ataf as the chair for the last 4 years, including during the very difficult of COVID-19, the period of COVID-19. Mr. Chodie, please share your reflections in leading these organizations and where you would want to see Ataf in the next 5-10 years. Over to you, Dr. Chodie.
Merci, Madame Mary. Je vais parler en français pour ceux qui...
Please pardon me, sir. If we can please get some headphones, Dr. Chodie will be speaking in French, and I know most of you are challenged. So, if we can...
Merci, Madame Mary. Quelles sont les performances de l'Ataf et comment on peut envisager voir l'Ataf dans 5 prochaines années. Je voulais simplement dire, je suis le président du Conseil il y a 4 ans et surtout, je suis le commissaire général de l'Office togolais des recettes, donc un des bénéficiaires assidus de Ataf. Je voulais simplement dire que l'Ataf a commencé et nous étions parmi les premiers en commençant par le renforcement des capacités, les formations, les séminaires, donc sur les politiques fiscales, sur les administrations fiscales, ce qui nous avait permis énormément d'améliorer nos cadres législatifs et nos régimes fiscaux. Nous avons vu tout à l'heure dans la présentation que le gars nous a dit, et surtout dans le mot du ministre. Le ministre a insisté disant que en 15 ans, Ataf a fait plus qu'on l'attendait. Et pour nous, administration fiscale comme le Togo, nous pouvons dire que Ataf a fait beaucoup plus que nous l'attendions de lui, puisqu'il a permis au Togo, comme dans d'autres, à former des centaines, sinon des milliers de nos cadres, qui nous ont permis de lever notre niveau au niveau des défis et des enjeux qui existent. Ce qui nous a permis d'adapter nos cadres législatifs et nos régimes fiscaux. Il a permis, dans les études, les différentes études assez pointues, pouvoir nous permettre d'élargir notre assiette fiscale et donc pour plus de mobilisation de recettes. Il nous a également assisté dans les aspects de l'audit ou des contrôles fiscaux sur les chantiers que nos staffs ne m'amélioreraient pas et qui nous a également aidé d'accroître sensiblement nos missions en termes de mobilisation de recettes. Après, la deuxième étape, la mission de Ataf s'est évoluée progressivement vers l'assistance sur les questions cruciales que traversaient nos administrations fiscales sur notre continent, en termes sur les questions de l'érosion de la base taxable, les prix des transferts, la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites, et puis la mise en place des modèles d'analyse des risques, etc. etc. Bon, bien nombre des administrations fiscales qui ont bénéficié le savent très bien, mais certains qui viennent de prendre la TAF en cours, certainement auront accès à tous ces outils et toutes ces expériences cumulées pendant les 15 dernières années. Maintenant, quelles sont les perspectives de la TAF? Qu'est-ce que nous attendons de la TAF pour les prochaines années? Nous l'avons dit dans les différents propos qui nous ont précédés, l'économie mondiale se digitalise et se globalise. Les défis sont dans l'adoption plus accrue et des technologies pour des administrations plus modernes, en mettant à niveau nos technologies modernes pour être à la hauteur de ce qui se présente en face nous dans les secteurs privés, dont des entreprises que nous sommes appelés à auditer. Donc, en termes de sciences des données, de l'intelligence artificielle, de l'analyse des risques, des données ou outils essentiels pour l'amélioration de l'efficacité de tous nos systèmes. Voilà un chantier important sur lequel Ataf s'investit et continuera certainement à s'investir pendant les prochaines années. L'un des chantiers très promoteurs de l'Ataf, c'est de mettre un niveau élevé de collaboration entre nos administrations fiscales pour que les plus avancés puissent aider les moins avancés à remonter. Je pense que c'est un des points aussi importants en termes d'échange d'informations, l'échange d'expériences, l'échange de meilleures pratiques entre les différents membres de l'organisation pour que chacun puisse, à son niveau, améliorer son système fiscal et la mobilisation de recettes. L'autre aspect aussi important, c'est l'inclusivité des différents aspects concernant les secteurs comme informels et pour lesquels, dans nos pays, comme nous le savons très bien, représente un défi de tous les jours et sur lesquels le Ataf devait pouvoir s'investir et améliorer davantage. Je ne saurais lister à Togo tous les défis, ils sont énormes, mais vu la diversité et les compétences que représente le secrétariat exécutif avec les experts qui y sont, vu également la diversité de nos administrations fiscales dans les différents forums, échanges, nous sommes certains que nous pourrons faire face à ces défis qui sont à nos portées pour être au rendez-vous de 2030 des objectifs de millénaire pour le développement en termes de mobilisation de recettes et surtout pour être à l'agenda de 2063 de l'Afrique où nous devions nous autofinancer et pour nos programmes nationaux. Voilà aussi dit, M. Mary, un peu résumé d'où vient Ataf et quelles sont les perspectives pour les 5-10 prochaines années. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chodie, and thank you so much also for clearly telling us your expectations over the next 5 years. I took note specifically of what you talked about in terms of digitization and what that means and the use of AI. And I recalled at our annual Ataf Tax Research Network conference that we had in Gaborone, Botswana, a few months ago, there was a presentation, I think, from the Zambia Revenue Authority, and they were talking, the speaker was talking about what AI can do for tax administrations. And from where I was sitting, I was like, oh my God. The change is so great that very soon tax administrations will have their key people running things like audits because everything else will be done by AI. And that means that we'll be deploying our resources better and we'll be even doing our risk analysis better because of the capacity that AI has. And that brings me to my next speaker. I want to thank you, Chairman, because I think there's so much that you have spoken about, especially also the work on peer-to-peer support. Early in the morning, we was talking to one of the guests from FCDO, Angela, if you'll permit me to say what we talked about earlier in the morning. And she was talking about the fact that the strength of ATAF is that we do a lot of South cooperation. And then I realized that a lot of our work is actually supporting each other, which is what has happened since the beginning. And Alan, I'm sure you recall a lot of that happened between the different countries and the region. Alan, we are talking about AI, and we have gone away from when we used to fax reports to each other back in the day. I'm sure most of the people in the room don't even know what a fax machine is. So reflecting on your past with ATAF, Alan, can you please walk us through your ATAF journey and also your experiences and where I'd want to see us? Alan is the Executive Director of the Uganda Road Agency and the former Commissioner General
of the Uganda Revenue Authority. Helen, please.
Thank you. Thank
Founder
you so
member.
much,
Thank you,
Mary.
Mr. Watt.
And thank you for inviting me to once again participate with friends and colleagues in on this forum. I do have an emotional attachment to Ataf, having been one of the founding members. And for me, the journey, the beginnings is really imprinted on my mind, because when we started, it was an idea that was just so fantastic at that time that it required such strong belief to actually take it off the ground. And I like what Logan said a little bit earlier, that we needed to create value even before the launch. I was actually trying to remember, when was that meeting we had in Pretoria where we just sat in the corner of a room, a few of us, and the late Pravin Gordon said, you know what, there's this idea, what if we put together a forum, an African Tax Administration Forum? And around the table, those of us who were there was no dissenting voice. Everybody was just really thinking, this is actually what we need. And those were the beginning years. And between that meeting and the subsequent meetings, especially the launch that took place here in Kampala in 2009, there was a lot of activity, a lot of the initial framework, the legal frameworks being put in place, shuttling from one capital city to another to try and get buy-in across the continent, because numbers were important. It was important to get a critical mass of African tax administrations to buy in. And as you know, at that time, we were so regionally divided. We had the Eastern Bloc, the Western Bloc. In Africa, we had the Northern Bloc. And just trying to break those walls and create one African-focused administration forum was no mean task. And I really have to salute the Secretariat, because they did a lot of work. Subsequently, much activities, capacity building, trainings, benchmarkings took place to the point where we got comfortable and thought we can actually launch this, and it will gain the kind of altitude that will catch the attention of not just of the other bodies in Africa, but like the OAU, but also the international bodies. We had been working closely with OECD, so that was not very, that wasn't going to be hard. But I remember particularly one year when we targeted being present at the G7 or the G8, G7. And it sounded like a dream, but it actually happened. And all these were being driven by the critical or the primary objectives of Africans supporting Africans and Africans being present at global meetings, global fora, with respect, not with what would have been condescending attitude from the bigger development partners. And as I look back now, and I've been trying to catch up, I've attended some of your meetings. I've read a little bit about what's happening in Ataf. You kindly continue sending news to me. I realized that this was an idea in its time that was given the full benefit of the team that I think I see sitting there, the colleagues that were with at that time, and the energy of our governments. And Ataf is what it is now because it got a real good starting. But it has been sustained by the conviction of the beginnings that we in regions, within our regions, can actually continue to support each other, that the African can help the African. South-to-South cooperation just beyond even our borders and our continents. And also the fact that Ataf, when we projected Ataf in the future, Ataf was to make sure that we sit in the global boardrooms and debate on tax matters, domestic mobilization, domestic revenue mobilization, at the same level with those who had gone ahead, who were a little more advanced. And as I have followed Ataf, I've seen that actually come to pass. Even more pressing at that time was the need to ensure that we were mobilizing revenues, because what happens with developed countries, they do dedicate a portion of their own GDPs to supporting other countries, to supporting African countries. But it will not always be the biggest, it will not always be priority. And I think that's logical. Nobody plans to help them others more than they can help their own citizens. So the idea was, okay, so when we sit at these tables, let us go there knowing that we actually have also mobilized own revenue. We have built value in our own institutions, in our own policies, in our own tax administrations, using technologies, so that we did not go there with begging bowls, but would go there saying, this is what we have been able to mobilize. And this is where we are going to. So seeing improving in tax collection and mobilization from the beginning to where it is now, I think it is an incredible achievement. I was tracking what Uganda Revenue Authority now collects on an annual basis. And I cannot even, I'm embarrassed to say what I, as the head at that time, was collecting, was mobilizing, in comparison to what John is mobilizing right now. It's a huge leap. And it has come as a result of all this support that Ataf has given and a lot of work that he and others have put in. So domestic revenue mobilization, South to South cooperation, or African is what I like to call African to African cooperation, and also being at the global tables, for me, were the things that stood out most, and the achievements are visible. And I think the future, honestly, is bright, to use the cliche. The future is bright because African countries can boast of greater revenues, of economic growth as a result of better tax administration strategies that they're using. And we are beginning, if we have not already moved significantly, to actually begin, especially in the area of digitalization, technology and digitalization, to speak equally with those who are with the developed countries. The increased focus on digital transformation and innovation, I see it here, I see it in Uganda, and I can only speak for Uganda right now because I've not visited other tax administration forums, but I see what is happening with the Uganda Revenue Authority. And I can almost conclude that it's happening elsewhere on the continent, that technology is central to tax administration, that it's no longer something that just enhances what we're doing, but is actually central to tax administration. And that's where the future is. That honestly is where the future is. And African countries, I'm sure, I hope there is a tool that measures the level of use of technology in tax administration so that we can help pull each other up and also speak favorably when we meet with the developed countries. The other one that I just want to kind of perhaps conclude with is that being present at the international meetings and standing or speaking there with confidence and pride helps us or helps you in tax administration who are currently in these in these positions and in these places to speak into future generations of those who will come after us. Because we're no longer carrying the dependency attitude or syndrome that we carried to these tables. I attended several when I was in Uganda Revenue Authority, and it was always very annoying to see how we were being patronized. And I think the time now is ripe for our tax administrators to be in demand in those places, in those countries, in those global meetings, because of the value offering that we have. And as and also because maybe, just to end with this point, that the partners who we thought as the big brother at that time, if you study the economies right now and the stresses different economies have gone through because of COVID, and now the Ukraine war, and now there's the Israeli war, and the wars across the world, these developed countries have become protectionist. It is America first. It is Germany is focused on Germany. America is focused on America. And I think that actually is good for us when we realize that we must pull ourselves up to remain relevant at that level, but remain relevant in a strong position. We must be in demand. We must not go there as to receive what they can afford to give us, because their economies must be protected, and so should ours. And when I say protection, I'm not talking about putting barriers around our borders, because sometimes we do that and then our economies collapse. But also being in demand in saying that these countries, these economies recognize the value of our tax administrations, of our countries, of our economies, and begin to demand on us, to place demand on us for purposes of growing not just their own economies, but ours as well. I just wanted to drop that there to show that the future, I think, is just amazing. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. And you ended on a very important note, because long gone are the days when Africa was being patronized, because I'm sure Tulani was listening very carefully, because the team he heads is now at the UN and busy negotiating tax rule, for more equitable tax rules for the continent, as well as in Paris, the inclusive framework. So I think there have been advances, and you're right, we have to be very confident, and we can only get what we fight for. And you're very right, the journey has been long, but I think if we go by what you just said, the key areas that you talked about, we should be home and dry. Thank you so much, Alan. I want to turn to you, Mr. Percy. Mr. Percy is now retired and in the private sector, but Mr. Percy was formerly the Commissioner General of Zimbabwe Revenue Authority, but a chair of the Ataf Council in its nascent years. Mr. Percy, in your reflections, if you can please speak to some of the challenges that Ataf faced at the time and how we were able to navigate through those, and what you think are the specific lessons that we learned from our past, and some words of wisdom for the future. Mr. Percy.
Thank you very much. I don't know about words of wisdom, but I will just say some words, and then we can be judges after that. We've come a long way, and since I retired, one of the things I've been doing is organizing my notes, because I always took notes from day one. And I came across some very interesting notes, which I will share with you on the genesis of Ataf. Patience and tenacity are very key in the journey of mobilizing resources. Yes, when we launched the 2009, yes, that was a culmination of some things which are unsaid and perhaps even unwritten somewhere. I recall, and I'm saying this because I think I need to pay special tribute to Pravin Gordhan. Because this idea started with a very small team at that particular time, years before it was resuscitated. I remember we had initially wanted to broach this subject in Algeria. We had a meeting in Algeria. Unfortunately, Pravin, one of his parents, got ill as we had landed, and he had to go back to South Africa. So we shelved it. And then we had some tentative discussions at some point in Nigeria. And then in Rwanda, I remember we discussed it with the then CG, James Musoni. We discussed it, but it then died, sort of. And then the meeting that Alan was referring to in South Africa and Pretoria, when Pravin then had this way of bringing the idea back to life. And since then, the rest is history. I just thought I'd share that to show that things may not work out immediately, that you want them, but if you persevere and you believe in your ideas, it will come to fruition. And very quickly, I'll just touch on other points, which if I was to go back in time and if I was to be asked what I would want to do, knowing what I know now and the experience that I've had, I think I would want to come back as the head of treasury for all African countries at the same time. Because now I think I can now link more between the revenues and what is really taking place at the grassroots in the village. There's still a lot of work to be done. And therein lies lack of support for revenue administrations from the population when they cannot relate to all these big monies being reported on, and then they look at their life, not much. So that's another dimension. But, and I'll start on I want to just briefly on a negative observation. My voice there is reluctance, unspoken reluctance by most treasury departments to fund the revenue authorities. They only do that when there is a strong political support. Otherwise, they grudgingly hold back or they grudgingly fund. That's why you find, I think in future, what we need to focus on more is more enhanced funding in ICT. Because right now it's drip, drip, drip. You really cannot build sustainable systems for revenue administrations. We need for our politicians to be bold enough and give the right financial support. AI, we're talking about it, but it will remain something which is out there for as long as we don't give meaningful support. Because technology is central to now and to the future of revenue administration. So we can never, I know fellow members have already spoken on that, but it is really you cannot have a future without technology in revenue administration. And I wanted to highlight also the fact that as Ataf, the fact that we, at the very early stage, we decided that we were going to define our own agenda and then seek cooperating partners to support us. And we are grateful for those cooperating partners. I won't mention them because I might leave some. But they are supporting our agenda as Africa. And for as long as we remain on that path, I think the growth is untold, the lengths that Ataf can get to. So that was, I think, an initiative which will help us into the future, as well as taking a lead in the international fora, as Alan said. It is important to represent African interests at the highest tables. And already we can see the fruits. But we need to continue doing that and to sell the importance of that to our political leaderships in different countries. Because sometimes you get CGs are not funded to attend meetings such as this one or at a global level, because somebody somewhere might think that it's not important enough. So we need to continue working on changing that mindset. So, and as I said, with the proper funding, then we'll be able to take control of AI as it relates to revenue administration. And then I want a few more points before I pass on. So while we've done, a lot has been covered by Ataf. The technical training, I think, is just, it's even our expectations at those early stages, they've been surpassed. And you will continue to do that because, as you know, revenue administrations are where perhaps you have the highest attrition in terms of staff. So you need to continue building and giving that support. And also, let's not forget the fusion between taxes and customs as revenue administrations. That will not go away. And as I said, I've been spending a lot of time, especially in North Africa. That is key. And we will continue on that. Also, now the last point I want to touch is really on your, second last point. As the heads and the senior executives, senior officials, when you talk of capacity building, which is really one key factor, a role that Ataf is playing, don't neglect yourselves. You also need to keep improving and developing and capacitating yourself as an individual. Know yourself. Who are you now that you have been appointed Commissioner General? Do you really know who you are? Because people will talk a lot of what they want. You can't stop them. And I know it happens to all of you. If it hasn't, it will happen. But the important trick is to know yourself. And that individual development will help you forward and will help you contribute more meaningfully to the growth of Ataf. And I'm now saying, on behalf of all those retired CGs and fellow executives, we are there, use us if you want to. And we are very cheap. Because we are happy to associate with the baby that we were part of for bringing into the world. And no matter how old how your child gets, you are still a child. My mother turned 88 last week, and today I even sent her a message. I know there will be a message. Are you okay? Are you eating enough? Yeah. She still thinks I'm a baby. So use us, and when you are bringing your CGs together, you have open sessions and with the retired people. They have a lot of ideas and hopefully wisdom to pass on. But back to you as an individual, remember, don't be despondent when we, in the press and in the media, we talk ill about you and we try to put you down. As long as you know yourself, and somebody says, remember, sticks and stones will hurt my body, but words will not hurt me. So we are behind you, wherever we are. We are with you, and we wish you well into the future. We bless you, and thank you for having us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Percy, especially for the blessings. I think in tax you always need those blessings. And thank you again for speaking to something that the Honorable Minister spoke to earlier, political support. And I think this is a recurring theme in this work, but I think what is clearly observable on the continent is that there's a lot more that, and tax is now much higher on the agenda. But thank you so much for your words of wisdom. And to say that Ataf in this new decade has taken on a specific focus on customs, and we hope that we'll be able then to support the countries in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Percy. And now I want to turn to Mr. Ken Morris. Mr. Morris, Botswana was a founder member of Ataf and has always been involved in Ataf through the different commissioners general. Botswana even sits on our council today, and Madam Chanda is a council member. Now, Mr. Morris, in your reflections, if you can please speak to us about how you see Ataf on this journey and where you think we should put our best foot in terms of the achievements in the next 15 years. Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just start off by thanking you for inviting me to be part of the panel here today. Well, Ataf can be described in one word or one phrase. It's excellence in motion. That's what Ataf is. It wasn't easy when we started. Challenges abounded, just like it happens with any nascent entity. But I think what's very, very critical as I reflect on the 15-year journey is that much as we had these challenges of institution building, Ataf never wavered from its core mandate, which was basically to ensure that we mobilize resources at a domestic level. Domestic resource mobilization has been at the forefront of what Ataf has been doing, and I want to believe will continue to do. Because domestic resource mobilization is very critical, particularly in the African context. Charity begins at home, as sometimes people say. Our independence is underpinned by our ability, as countries, by our ability to mobilize resources domestically. And to the extent that Ataf has been part of that journey and will continue to be part of that journey, I think we are on the right track. I'm looking at my left side here. I see quite a number of people who are our development partners. They have indeed played a major role in bringing Ataf to what it is. We want to continue with them, but we want to continue with them at a level where one could say we are equal partners. We want to keep on convincing them that to the extent that they assist Ataf, maybe over time, the resources that they plow onto us as an African continent could be plowed elsewhere, because countries in various regions require and need development partners at some stage. So, Madam Chair, I want to see Ataf continue to grow from strength to strength. I want to believe that if in our journey going forward, besides the issues, the fundamentals that have been talked to, AI is one, mainstreaming gender, I want to also look at issues around climate going forward. Because climate, we've had so many, we've just had a conference on climate in the recent past. If we don't take care of Mother Earth, what will be the role of revenue administrations? Because we'll all perish. So as we go about in our journey to develop tax administrations to mobilize the required revenue, it's very critical that we should take care of the planet. We must start mainstreaming climate issues into the tax agenda because those will go hand in hand. Madam Chair, the journey, the 15-year journey, has been a remarkable one. Ataf has played a role in terms of assisting the Botswana Unified Revenue Service, and I would say Botswana at large, capacity building. And in fact, there was a time when I was Commissioner General at BURS when I felt that perhaps we are getting more than our fair share of assistance from Ataf. Because it all called for a telephone. You just call this executive secretary, and in no time the resources will be there to partner with you, to help you, so that you could actually improve. I remember when we joined Ataf, our contribution of tax to GDP was hovering at around 14%. And by the time I left BURS, we had moved to around 23%. Of course, we know that this is not necessarily, doesn't accord with what OECD countries are at. But I want to believe that with the able leadership of my successor, Mrs. Janet Makolo, it's one of her priorities to move from the 23% or 20% maybe to 30, 34%. This is a tall order, but of course, I've been watching what's happening within the domestic tax fund, and I want to believe that they are on the right trajectory, and thank you very much for that. Well, going forward, Ataf, continue your advocacy role. Be the voice of Africa. Continue to be one. Continue with the dialogue with the political leadership to convince them that tax and democracy, tax and development go hand in hand. You don't mobilize your resources domestically, you cannot claim to be independent. Continue with this forum, similar forum, or you bring your commissioners general, development partners, people from the media to engage so that the solutions that ultimately you have are all-inclusive. Let's not tax administration operate in isolation. Let's not have an ATAF that will work in isolation without bringing aboard other members of society, because the solutions that we'll find thereafter will be solutions that will be embedded and acceptable to the community at large. Somebody talked about ICT. ICT, when we started on ICT journey a couple of years ago, when you had a computer, you will feel proud about it, but you would not use it. It was said that computers were support tools. And nowadays, if you are not careful, they will run the world. We have to make sure that, the ICT revolution help us grow. AI tools. Whenever I have a problem, I ask my computer, what is the solution to this? I go into AI tools, and I have instant answers. So let's be careful. Let's harness this technology. so that we can improve going forward. Finally, you know, the issue around gender mainstreaming. I'm happy that Ataf, you have a chapter on women in tax administration. Let's take this matter seriously going forward. This has always been a men's world. And that's why many things have gone wrong. Let's mainstream the women, things will go right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morris. I like how you concluded your reflections, and I'm sure somebody else in this audience liked what you said, Madame Hermini, who is also the chair of the Ataf Women in Tax Network. I'm sure liked what you talked about in terms of gender mainstreaming, and that has become a key area of focus for Ataf, and I want to assure you one that we take seriously. But I also like what you said about mainstreaming climate issues in taxation, and I think that also is in relation to what the minister said earlier on, and something that the colleague from UNDP was talking about earlier. I think it is something that as a continent we really have to take on. So thank you so much for your reflections. My last speaker is Mr. Mark Baxman, and Mark is the head of development cooperation at BMZ, the German embassy in Kigali. Mark, BMZ and all our other development partners have been a key pillar in the work that we have been doing as Ataf right from inception. And some of those workshops, the initial workshops that came up with most of the work that Ataf is doing were actually supported by BMZ and the other partners. Can you please share your reflections on the journey that you've walked with Ataf? I will really be obliged. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Such a great pleasure to be with you here today, representing not only the German embassy in Rwanda, but also the BMZ, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, at this distinguished panel and the annual meetings of Ataf here in Kigali, the beautiful city of Kigali, which I'm happy to call my home since almost 1.5 years now. So this year's annual meeting marks a 15-year journey in transforming tax systems around the African continent. Since its foundation in 2009, Ataf has become a cornerstone institution, growing its membership and working closely with all its members to mobilize domestic resources, combat illicit financial flows, and shape the global tax discourse. So we commend Ataf, its leadership, and all its members on this significant achievement. So I would like to take the opportunity to highlight one aspect of Ataf's work that very much speaks to our approach in the German Development Corporation, and that is the aspect of working together, collaboration, building strong and equal partnerships. So since its inception, Ataf has invested in its partnerships with regional and international organizations and thereby inserting African voices into global tax discussions. For example, Ataf has built a close working relationship with the OECD on strengthening efforts in tax transparency and the exchange of information in Africa. Ataf's partnership with the African Union Commission and has also been established. Another example. So in their close collaboration on the development of key strategies on tax and combating illicit financial flows has contributed to greater policy coherence. And this partnership is poised to become even more transformative in the future, given the African Union's G20 membership, as well as South Africa's upcoming G20 presidency, which prioritizes reforming the international financial architecture. So German Development Corporation has been a steadfast and proud partner in Ataf's journey since 2010. We recognize the meaningful progress sometimes So we recognize that meaningful progress sometimes requires engaging in challenging and even uncomfortable debates. With ATAF, we have always found a partner willing to engage in open and constructive dialogue, even when it meant critically examining our own approach, our own assumptions. And it is through our collaboration with ATAF that the German Development Corporation has been able to realize its development policy objectives in strengthening tax systems and combating illicit financial flows in Africa. Let me share just a few key success stories from our view of ATAF, and one is clearly how ATAF has used the power of regional cooperation and South-South cooperation. Regional cooperation empowers African countries to address cross-border challenges such as tax evasion and avoidance, profit shifting, and illicit financial flows. And as a Pan-African institution, ATAF plays a pivotal role in fostering this collaboration, for instance, through the formation of technical committees that pool the expertise across ATAF's membership and thereby addressing complex tax issues. So ATAF's technical assistance programs have delivered impressive results, enabling member countries to collect an additional $1.3 billion in taxes over 6 years. In 2023 alone, these efforts yielded over $700 million through audits, a clear reflection of ATAF's impacts. And as mentioned before by my previous speakers, the establishment of the African Women in Tax Network reflects ATAF's dedication to gender equality. And that also closely aligns with the German policy on a feminist development policy and addresses this critical intersection of tax policy and gender equality. Also, the Executive Master of Taxation program has been another significant milestone in our cooperation with ATAF. Through this program, we have strengthened professional expertise with 86 officials from 25 African revenue administration successfully graduating, and I heard that some alumni are also in this room today. The German Development Corporation is proud to have collaborated closely with ATAF in realizing all of these achievements, primarily through the Good Financial Governance in Africa program implemented by the GIZ since 2012. But beyond our cooperation with ATAF, we also work closely with some of the member states bilaterally on tax-related issues. For example, here in Rwanda, which I'm most familiar with, we work closely with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning to inform Rwanda's medium-term revenue strategy 2 about the opportunities of environmental taxation. So these are also where we see a big potential for further domestic revenue generation, and as the Minister in his opening remarks and his keynote said, it is now time to turn this potential into reality. In closing, I would like to emphasize that ATAF's achievements over the past 15 years are a testament of the power of commitment, innovation, cooperation, and strong and equal partnerships. And as a German government, we reaffirm our commitment to continuing our close cooperation with ATAF in the years to come. Thank you very much, Murakuza Chane.
Murakoze namwe, Mark. Thank you. Mark, we appreciate you and all our development partners who have walked this journey with us, and thank you for those reflections. As we bring this to a close, because my colleagues tell me we cannot have a Q&A because of the slightly late start, so the gentlemen and ladies, unfortunately for Alan, it won't be easy to network with you, but for the rest, they'll be here over the next 3 days during the conference so we can continue to interact. I want to bring this to a close by saying that ATAF appreciates everybody who has walked this journey for the 15 years, and we look forward to continuing to walk this journey together. Everybody talked about 4 key areas. They talked about the agility of ATAF and how it's gotten us here, the tenacity of the work that the tenacity that has been involved in delivering the work, and they talked about some of the emerging areas, issues to do with digitization, issues to do with climate mainstreaming and gender mainstreaming, but most importantly, the fact that we remain focused on constant improvement in reforms that lead both to administrative efficiency and clear policy formulation that enable us to collect tax that is relevant for our national development. I want to thank all my panelists for your reflections and to thank you, the audience, for being very good listeners. And I want to thank specifically the leadership of Ataf that has steered this organization to this level, because as we celebrate this, we also celebrate Mr. Watt, who has been really the leader of the organization. And Mr. Watt is a revolutionary by birth, and he participated in the revolution in the home front and has really led the revolution in terms of the tax changes that have happened and the development of Ataf and where it is at 15. And so as we celebrate 15, we also celebrate you, Mr. Watt, and everybody who has walked this journey. So thank you so much for this participation in this session. I want to hand over the next part of the session to my colleague, Mr. Romeo Nkulu Ella, and I don't want to take his thunder. So Romeo, I want to hand over to you so that you can handle the next part. Thank you so much.
Merci, Madame Bainé, pour cette session très inspirante. Je crois que vous avez maintenant entendu de la bouche de ceux qui étaient là l'historique de l'Ataf, comment ça s'est fait, où est-ce que nous en sommes. Vous avez écouté les mots de sagesse de ceux qui ont bâti cette organisation depuis le premier jour. Et vous avez même eu un petit aperçu du documentaire qui va suivre, que vous aurez le temps de regarder plus tard dans la semaine, sur l'historique de l'Ataf au cours des 15 dernières années. Le prochain intervenant que je vais inviter va vous présenter cet historique sur une perspective différente. Il s'agit de M. Richard Perry. C'est l'un des auteurs d'un ouvrage qui saisit, sous forme documentée, l'ensemble de cet historique que vous venez d'entendre, en portant aussi un regard sur les perspectives d'avenir de l'organisation. Richard, si vous voulez bien nous rejoindre sur le podium, s'il vous plaît. Est-ce qu'il est là, Richard? Richard Perry? There you go. Donc, c'est un livre qui parle un peu de l'impact transformationnel de la TAF, non seulement au niveau du continent, mais également sur la scène internationale. Et Richard, c'est l'un des auteurs de ce livre, il y en a deux. Vous pourrez vous le procurer une fois qu'il sera officiellement lancé, juste à l'extérieur, au niveau du comptoir d'enregistrement. Je vais donner la parole à Richard pour qu'il vous fasse une plus grande introduction de ce livre avant de passer au lancement officiel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, Romeo, for those kind words. I'd like to thank Ataf, first of all, for inviting me to this beautiful country and this beautiful city, but more directly for allowing me to introduce Ataf at 15, Insights from an African Tax Organization. As you know, if you're an international tax organization, you need to waive a publication whenever it's mentioned. I would also thank Ataf for the excellent planning which brought this section in at the beginning of a conference which was about preparing for the future. Because what is fundamental here is Ataf grounding itself in its own experience, its own history, and its own understanding. And I think Ataf's strength lies in its ability to understand itself. And that's in part what this particular publication is about. Unfortunately, my co-author, my friend Lincoln Marais, can't be here today, but I'd just like to acknowledge him and share this moment with him. I must start with some thanks, and I'd like to thank all of you who gave your time, your experience, and shared your memories, and spoke movingly with me over many hours about your own Ataf journeys. This book is not a catalogue of Ataf achievements. It's not even really an assessment of how significant those achievements might be in the wider world. It is an attempt to get behind that into Ataf's soul and what makes Ataf tick, why Ataf is what it is. And it's a story. Ataf are Africans are champion storytellers. They interpret the world as they see it. At a time of transition, both in the organization itself, of course, and in the wider world, the kinds of global shocks that we heard the Minister refer to earlier. It's important for stories which allow us to remember and situate the past, make sense of the past, to understand the present in the light of that past, and to change the future based on that past. So while we're preparing for the future, what we're really talking about is how to change the future. And Ataf's a change organization, and that's what Ataf's fundamental DNA is about. This book is inspired by the wildly optimistic idea, and the Executive Secretary referred to it earlier, of setting up an organization, bringing together the whole continent around domestic resource mobilization. This is a crazy idea. Tax is not a cooperative position. Tax is a competitive position. You fight other countries for their tax bases, and you get as much as you can for yourself. That's the traditional view of tax. However, Ataf managed to challenge that view of what tax was, by building domestic resource mobilization, and indeed by using domestic resource mobilization as the basis for the social contract. Tax systems, improved governance, and an improved lives of African people resulted. The idea of this concept, the background to this concept is very complex, and we've heard lots of slightly different variants of how this came about from our panel members and from others previously. It's important to know that everybody's view of what Ataf is different, and everybody has a different story and a different experience. But it's fundamentally about a key political insight. It is a political insight, which is that better tax systems can unite Africa and unite Africa against dependency. And that notion has been expressed already. But how did it really happen? Who's really responsible? Well, you actually have to read the book to find out. Ataf needed, however, to fan this spark of an idea into a real thing, into something that worked. And again, we've had references to how this came about. It came from making the idea real, turning form into substance, providing real benefits, and providing real benefits quickly, up front, making sure that not only were the benefits provided, but people knew about the provision of those benefits, publicizing this, communicating this. And again, part of Ataf's success is in precisely that, its ability to achieve things and tell people about them so they understood what was being achieved. This is your story in the end, this story of Ataf. It's your story told through the voices of Ataf's people. From ministers, chairs of council, including many of the members on the panel here, commissioners general, development partners, and others, technicians, and all of those who worked in management and in between, who were part of Ataf's journeys. And they are journeys, because everybody's gone through their own journey with Ataf. Everybody has their own view, their own perspective, and their own experience of this. But the journey leads to a single end, which is better lives for African people. The journey is moved through training, moved through capacity building and support, which is the initial starting point for Ataf, and the whole notion of capacity building is very important in this. It's about recognizing the relationship between administration and tax policy, and it's about a remarkable area in which Ataf managed to do something that no one else had done, which was to bring an independent African tax organization into the global stage. And again, this has been mentioned before, but I think what's really important is to understand the real significance of that. This is a group of African countries who have been in a situation, essentially, where they've been struggling to mobilize domestic resources. to use those domestic resources in a way that benefits the people of their countries. And now Ataf has managed to develop the technical ability, the political punch to actually make a difference, and to make a difference in international bodies which are setting the tax rules. And this is something which will be highly significant in the next 5 years. This is something where the future of Ataf, in terms of how the tax world will look, will be of critical importance. So Ataf is a case study. It's a case study in a way of mutuality, how experience sharing and mutual support made Ataf. It was the sadly recently departed ex-Commissioner and Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, who said at the very beginning of this process, the very simple concept, together we are stronger. Together within countries where finance, tax and customs reinforce and learn from each other. Together across countries where, for example, Rwanda passes on its acquired knowledge on revenue forecasting to Togo. Together with African institutions, such as the AU and the African Development Bank and many others. And together with development partners, sharing resources, experience and goodwill. Finally, Ataf is a case study in leadership. We'll soon say goodbye to our departing Executive Secretary Logan Wart, whose passion, strength, agility of mind, and humanity have made Ataf what it is. It's a hard act to follow, but we know that with the wise guidance of Council, the diligence and technical expertise of the committees, and I underline that word, technical expertise, well, that's 2 words, because that has made a huge difference to how Africa is perceived in the global environment, and that is really important for the kinds of reasons that were suggested, again, by the panel earlier. The commitment of the Secretariat, something which is often overlooked. And in that context, I need to thank Eugene Southgate. Sorry, that's a terrible mistake. Eugene Southgate and his team, Desiree Otta, Ziggy Fakili, and others, for making the process work with regard to developing this particular project. And in the end, what's critically important is what it is. Ataf is what Ataf does. And here, I think the continued dynamic engagement in areas such as the Ataf Women's Tax Network, which has just been talked about, shows just how much Ataf is in safe hands for the future. And just to end, Mary Baine has said, we're not just tax officials, we're a catalyst for change and an architect of our futures. This is the primary message I think that we need to deliver as to what Ataf really is. We hope you enjoy the book, and we hope that you feel inspired by your own achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. I will ask you to stay on stage, and I will je vais inviter les autres panélistes à se lever, s'il vous plaît. May I please invite all the panelists to stand for a photo opportunities. You can join them, Richard. Vous voulez bien les rejoindre? Merci. Pendant qu'on se prépare pour la photo, juste une précision que ce livre sera vendu et toutes les recettes qui vont découler de la vente de ce livre reviendront directement à la table. Donc c'est une autre forme de mobilisation de ressources pour l'organisation. Je vous remercie. On applaudit très fort pour eux. Merci à tous. Nos hippos, je pense que dans l'intérêt du temps, nous allons passer directement à la prochaine session que vous aurez le plaisir de modérer. Donc, si vous voulez bien appeler votre panel sur le podium. Merci.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we bring the energy back into the room with a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you very much, and for our moderator who's done an excellent job. I do understand that I stand between us and a much-deserved lunch break. But this next session is certainly a conversation you don't want to miss. It's going to be sharp, short, concise, dynamic, and highly energetic, and it's going to get us ready for lunch. In this session, we're going to be focusing on tax policy and the extent to which it is an enabler for financing development in Africa. We want to shine the spotlight on domestic resource mobilization and how that aligns with Africa's own ambitions for its development and taking its development agenda by the horns. I'm going to kindly invite our presenter, Dr. Eric Ogunleye, who is the director for the African Development Institute at the AFDB. Let's give Dr. Eric a round of applause as he comes up. Thank you very much. And the panelists that will join us, we are joined by, virtually, by His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, who of course is representing the AUC in this conversation. I'm going to invite back Mr. Ronald Niwenshuti, Commissioner General of the RRA, to please join us on stage. I'm going to invite for the first time to the stage Mr. Murtaza Jiwanji, the Regional SDG Finance and Policy Advisor at the UNDP. Mr. Logan Watt, might I please invite you back to join us on the podium. And last but not least, I think I have all of my panelists. I'm just missing a few key people. So, Mr. Watt, have we lost? He's on his way, okay. And do we have the commissioner online? Can I get a thumbs up from the technical team? Do we have Ambassador Muchanga online? All right, I'll come back to that. And I've got, of course, Mr. Niwenshuti on the stage, Mr. Jiwanji on the stage, Mr. Watt is going to walk back in. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the way we're going to run this session is I'm going to invite Dr. Eric Ogunleye to the podium, and he's going to make some framing remarks. He has graciously said to me, Nozi, I see we're running out of time, so I'm very happy to not take any questions after that. So he's been very generous in saving us some time. And I see that Ambassador Muchanga is on line with us. So welcome, Ambassador. We were now inviting Dr. Eric Ogunleye to extend some framing remarks. Dr. Eric, over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Please, may I have the clicker for the PowerPoint presentation?
Can we please load the presentation? Thank you very much.
Okay. So, good morning. Is it afternoon? We're still morning, right? It's because of the time zone I'm coming from. It's still morning where I'm coming from, so that's why I'm saying good morning. So, good day, everyone. I want to, on behalf of the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and the Chief Economist and Vice President of the bank, Professor Kevin Urama, to thank Ataf very much for inviting the African Development Bank to this forum. Of course, it's been a long years of partnership, and we're very happy to be part of the success story of Ataf. So what I'll be doing here this afternoon, this morning, will be to quickly run through just some framing that will help to put us in the mood with respect to issues related to global financial architecture and what African countries should be doing to ensure that we arm ourselves. I've heard a lot earlier this morning about the fact that we should not be apologetic about what we need to do. We need to take action, and we need to be fast about it. So here will be basically what the structure of my presentation will look like. Now, the first thing is, what are the challenges, what are the issues with the global financial architecture that makes it really difficult for African countries that require action on our part? The first thing to acknowledge is that, of course, the global financial system has achieved a lot. And we must acknowledge that in terms of contributing to global development and also mitigating the impacts of shocks that global economies have been facing all these years. But the point is, the global financial system of operation has been counter-cyclical, and it has been episodic. It has not been able to provide sustained financing to the needs of African countries, and more importantly, it has also been lopsided. So the question then is, of course, if we look back at some of the shocks that the global economies, including African countries, have faced, we see evidence of this lopsidedness at HIPIC, during COVID, and so on and so forth. And of course, what we have seen with respect to these type of challenges is that it's now boiling over into global commons, issues like climate change, health pandemics, and issue of geopolitical tension. So the question then is the issue of affordability, issue of timeliness, and issue of scale. Those are the key issues that we face that make the global financial architecture to be difficult and sometimes not responding as we would like to the need of African countries. So the question then is, if you look at access to emergency financing, for example, as to illustrate what we're talking about, it is skewed toward developed economies and not in favor of countries that need those resources most. If you take, for example, when we're talking about the SDR's allocation of $650 billion in 2021, African countries got only $33 billion. The majority, most of those resources went to developed countries. So the point, therefore, is, where is Africa? Where are developing countries in terms of benefiting from this global system? Now, if you also look at the fiscal measures that were rolled out during the pandemic to fight the pandemic, Africa's share was only $89.5 billion, which is 0.5% of the total resources that were rolled out. So that helps us to see, therefore, that Africa needs to get better fair share in the global financial system. Now, how about access to low-cost concessional finance and for low-income countries? Again, it's also obvious that Africa's access to low-cost concessional financing is far below what we have for most of the other countries or other regions of the world, which makes African countries, which also further laid credence to the fact that African countries need to benefit better. Now, if you look at the current level of ADF replenishment, it is obvious that whatever resources we raise, even with IDA, will not be sufficient to finance the needs of African countries. So now, let's talk about bilateral debt and ODA flows. They are also very most likely to remain very suppressed, and they will also be short-term in nature, making it difficult for them to respond to the development financing needs of African countries. And if you also take a look at Africa's access to external financial flows, they are also low if you compare the region with other developing regions of the world. For example, at 174.9 billion in 2022. If you look at all the resources put together, whether ODF, FDO, portfolio flows, and remittances, for Africa, they're less than 30% of the total financial outflows, meaning therefore that Africa is losing more. Total outflows in that year was 587 billion. And where are they coming? Where are the losses coming from? Mispricing of Africa's risk is taking about 74.5 billion. Illicit financial flows is taking about 90 billion. And corruption is taking about 148 billion, while international profit shifting is taking another 275 billion. So Africa, therefore, is a net giver, as it is, of resources to the global economy compared to what it is getting. Now, there have been a lot of, actions to say reforming the global architecture, financial architecture, could help to some extent in solving the financial needs of African countries. Of course, yes, if we correct the global financial architecture as we have it currently, it will still not solve the financing needs of African countries that we see here. So we may be able to free about 169.4 billion a year, but that is only 42% of the total financing need in African countries. And what that implies, in short, is these are the key challenges that we see that are emerging that makes it very difficult for Africa to really benefit from the global financial system. If you take, for example, more than 70% of Africa's publicly guaranteed debt is denominated in the US dollars. And most of us know how Africa's currencies have been behaving in recent African countries' currencies. So if you take a loan of 100 billion and there's an exchange rate depreciation of just 10%, your debt increased by that amount automatically without adding or before you add the interest rate. So these are all challenges that the continent is facing. And if you look in 2024, it is estimated that African countries will pay about 74 billion in debt service. Where will the resources come from? All as a result of the global financial system. Now, what then is the solution? So if we have seen that the current architecture does not seem to meet the development financing need of African countries, what do we need to do? Well, the solution is to look inward. And again, a lot of things have been said about this, which is the focus of Ataf with respect to raising domestic resources. So domestic resource mobilization has been adjudged to be the best option, most reliable, predictable option for development financing. ODA, FDI, any other external sources of financing are unpredictable. But because domestic resources are internal, it is possible for you to estimate, to simulate, to know how much resources you are most likely going to get. So it's important, therefore, that African countries focus on looking internally through the huge resources they have where resources can actually be mobilized. And that is why all continental initiatives, Agenda 2063 of the African Union, Sustainable Development Goals, or even African Development Bank's high fives, they all emphasize the importance of domestic resource mobilization. So it's important, therefore, that African countries begin to look inward to see how they can raise resources from these sources. But now, what are these sources of finance? As we do know, taxes are most important when it comes to raising domestic resources within Africa. But the point remains that when we look at what Africa is able to do, they have been limited. In 2022, for example, the income from taxes reached about 605 billion in Africa, which is much lower than other sources of development financing, which added up to 62 billion. Whether you're adding ODA, you're looking at foreign direct investment and other sources of financing. So it is important, therefore, if you look in terms of trends, what has a trend look like in terms of what African countries have been able to do on mobilizing resources internally to finance its own development? Well, the challenge most countries have is the fact that the income tax base is very low, or very narrow, I mean to say. Very narrow tax base. So it's important, therefore, that you start with building the tax base. In addition to that, we have also seen the fact that most economies have very large informal sectors. Informal sectors are very difficult to target, and so if you do not formalize and bring those people under the tax net, it becomes challenging for you to know what they're doing and for you to know how you can raise resources from the activities that they engage in. So the chart we have there is just a simple example to illustrate the issues we have here. Now, what we have seen is the reduction in the tax revenues that African countries are facing today is due to some of these challenges we have mentioned, as you can see there in panel A to the left. Now, but meanwhile, we do know from research, like I said earlier, that domestic resource mobilization is absolutely necessary because of its dependability, because of its predictability, and because of the fact that you have control over it. They are internal, they are not external. So that makes it more important. And when you see, if you look at the trends, there are about 28 African countries that actually experienced some increase in 2022 relative to the 5-year before COVID outcome. But only 21 countries were able to achieve tax revenues that are above the 15% of GDP threshold. So that implies, therefore, that many countries in Africa have a lot of things to do. They have a lot of action to take when it comes to that. So the charts we have here are simply to illustrate some of the key issues we see that are emerging from these observations. Now, there are several factors we see that tend to limit the country's ability to raise resources, which I have mentioned a couple of them. Demographic issue, macroeconomic issue, informality, and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of talks have also been made here today with respect to the tax system. How do we ensure we have a tax system that is able to respond to the need that takes into consideration the context of the countries? So when the context of the countries are taken into consideration, and we ensure that we fashion our tax system, digitalization has also been mentioned. These are some of the key things that we need to do that will assist countries to be able to generate more revenues, especially from existing taxes. In many cases, the focus should be not just introducing new taxes, but ensuring the ability to collect existing taxes. Because in many countries, we have a lot of taxes that are there in existence, but the institutions responsible for their collection are not able to collect them. So how do we strengthen the system to ensure that we are able to collect these existing taxes? These are issues that we really need to think about. Now, sorry, it looks like my clicker is not responding anymore. Okay, so, is this from IT?
Technical team, can you move the slides from your side, please?
Okay, let me just speak on just press towards concluding. Number one, I think, like I mentioned earlier, illicit financial flows is one of the key issues, one of the key constraints that is preventing African countries from raising resources. So the question should be, how do we plug these leakages that we experience in most of the countries. So let me conclude by just talking briefly with respect to what African Development Bank is doing to assist countries to ensure that they improve their domestic resources and be able to lead. One of the things we're doing is to ensure that we, first of all, strengthen our own internal system. So we have developed a number of products that strengthen our internal system, policies, programs, projects, and strategies. For example, we have the sustainable borrowing policy, which helps countries to be able to develop their strength in reducing their reliability on external financing, but focus more on internal resource mobilization. We also have the Public Finance Management Academy for Africa, which aims to also strengthen the capacity of African countries in terms of the officials to be able to also support their institutions when it comes to internal resource mobilization. We also have what we call the African Debt Managers Initiative Network, and what that does is to bring together in a platform where the debt managers could have discussion on what actions are required to be able to support their countries to strengthen their capacity. And we do this in several areas, on training, on technical assistance, and also organizing policy dialogue, as well as peer-to-peer learning that a lot of those who have spoken earlier have also talked about. Now, one more thing that we're doing is also to support the system, the revenue-generating systems. I met with one of the Commissioner General of the Revenue Authorities, and we just had a quick chat this morning. I met him earlier somewhere in Guinea-Bissau, and he told me that African Development Bank has assisted them to generate about 100% over and above what they were able to generate before the support that we provided for them through the Asikuda system. These are the type of success stories that makes us happy to know that we are able to support our regional member countries to be able to strengthen their capacity to generate resources. So in conclusion, I would say we're very happy to be here with Ataf, and we look forward to working together. I also want to pass a message to all the regional member countries who are here that the African Development Bank, we have also, working with Ataf, a lot of products that can help you either on domestic revenue mobilization, either on budget planning and implementation, on curbing illicit financial flows, improving transparency and accountability, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much, and I look forward to further discussion on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eric. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to transition into a panel discussion now. My hope is that we start off by hearing from His Excellency Albert Muchanga, who's with us online. And hopefully, technical team, we can pull him back up and just confirm that he can hear us. The first question is a question to him. Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you very much. I see Ambassador Muchanga. Ambassador, the African Union has made significant progress in driving change in the global financial architecture that Dr. Eric Ogunleye has been speaking about. And we've seen some of these successes in your efforts around trade, credit rating agencies, as well as fiscal reforms, really pushing for fiscal reforms on the continent. The question to you, Ambassador, is what would you say has been the impact of these efforts on achieving Agenda 2063 primarily? And then as a second part is, if you could give advice to different countries on the continent, what would you highlight as the key focus areas that we need to be focusing on as we respond to a global financial architecture that is not only changing, but that might not always be favorable to the African context? Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I warmly congratulating Ataf
through the sector and the other team for the 15 years that they are commemorating. It's a long journey, a journey of results, which are very, very impressive. Good safety to Africa. We congratulate you. Now, when it comes to your question, the impact, of course, can be measured with respect to growth of the gross domestic product, growth of GNI per capita among African countries or the various African countries. Those statistics are yet to come. But we have made quite a number of contributions, one of which is that both the African Development Bank and the African Export-Import Bank at one time came to us to say we need a decision or decisions of the summit, to each one of them, approving that we recapitalize, and we were able to facilitate, and the two Pan-African institutions were able to mobilize the funding to enhance their capital bases. And of course, at the international level, we have been advocating for capitalization of multilateral development finance institutions so that they are positioned to provide long-term financing to developing countries. The problem we face of external debt challenges is that most of the debts are 7 to 10 years, whereas development projects take about 30 years or more to start producing results. So that is one of the areas. The other one, which is still ongoing, is the recapitalization or replenishment of both the International Development Association and the African Development Fund. We hope that these things will emerge. Now, a key test to the impact will be, we now need to start calculating to say what percentage of resource inflows flowing towards the implementation of the African Union Agenda 2063. This question comes into focus because in the Agenda 2063, we committed as Africa that for it to be fully implemented, we need to commit 75 to 95% of the resources required for its implementation from domestic sources. Now, that one is a little bit challenging because, as indicated earlier, not all African countries are able to reach the threshold of having 50% of GDP from their domestic tax bases. And in fact, some countries as low as 5%. So we still have a huge problem. And then, of course, the statistics again, which were presented by our colleagues from the African Development Bank, are very clear. Annually, we face a financial shortage of $1.3 trillion for us to implement the UN Sustainable Development Bank, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the high fives of the African Development Bank. Now, that figure can also be looked at in a different perspective. And this is that if you look at the 2024 Africa Wealth Report, there's a very, very interesting figure there. The cumulative investable wealth of Africans across the continent is about $2.5 trillion. Now, if we can mobilize those funds, then we would be able to really meet the shortfall. So this brings in the need for us now to start engaging the African high wealth individuals so that we are able to know what problems they face, not investing in Africa, and we will be able to unlock those resources. The impact, not yet measurable, but there's a lot of room for improvement. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think some very strong insights there. As you point us to, of course, GDP performance as the first measure, but you're saying to what extent, for example, are we really analyzing financial instruments and their alignment to the
My apologies. Ambassador, thank you very much for your contributions. I think you've highlighted for us some of the key metrics that we need to be really using to critically analyze the extent to which DRM efforts can finance development outcomes. You not only speak about GDP, but you speak about analyzing the financial instruments and the extent to which they are really designed for the projects that we're looking for on the continent. What percentage of resources mobilized is actually directed towards Agenda 2063 or the SDG to Agenda of 2030. But also, you make an important point, which is that Agenda 2063 is premised on 95% of those resources being raised domestically. And so with that in mind, and I bring Dr. Eric's presentation as well, we find ourselves in an interesting place. And so, Mr. Niwen Shuti, I'm going to jump over to you, if I can. I want to bring another global strand into this conversation. If we looked at Action 4 of the recently adopted Pact of the Future that's just come out of the UN summit in September, it calls for an inclusive and effective tax cooperation system that is really then going to significantly contribute towards financing our SDGs. The question to you, though, is if you reflect on the reforms that Rwanda has taken on, how have these, one, contributed to domestic resource mobilization, but more importantly, how have these contributed to resources to fund development ambitions?
Thank you so much for the question, and I want to thank all the previous presenters for giving us an introduction into this topic. Action 4 of the UN talks about sustainable development financing gap and how we can close that. And coming to the question you have asked, is that tax administrations are, and of course in particular countries, are requested to design a way to improve and enhance revenue mobilization, not only for from domestic resources, but also on the international arena. So when you talk about cooperation, for example, as Rwanda in particular, we have embraced working with other international organizations, and in this particular, I want to thank Ataf for the support that we are receiving in the areas of international taxation, for example. And today I would say that under international taxation, with the skills enhancement that we have done in that area, the number of our officers that have undergone the training, we have managed to collect at least above 30% of the total collection that we get from the audit revenues. Secondly, is that we are also working on the front line of exchange of information. For Rwanda, for example, next year we shall be peer reviewed, but currently we are sharing information with other countries using our current instruments that we have. For example, the DTAs. Rwanda today has above 16 DTAs that are already running. We are also members to the MAC, and that has given us a pool of information to use in terms of sharing information with other countries in order to reduce the revenue leakages that are taking place when international transactions. But that is not the end of the story. There are also other inefficiencies that, as a country, we have tried to address. And in this area, we have tried to identify technology not only as an enabler in our working, but a foundation for our modern tax administration. And for that, we have rolled out a number of systems in the area of VAT collection. Today, you know, our flagship system, which is the electronic billing machine, which has tried to reduce the leakages in the collection of VAT. And I'm glad to say that we're also sharing that with other countries. But not only on that, we have also identified other systems that have helped us to collect taxes. Today, I'm glad to say that most of the processes are done online, whether filing, payment, and others. Technology is now a foundation of what we are doing, and that has boosted our way of collecting taxes. But not only that, again, as a tax administration, we have enhanced our engagement with taxpayers. When I talk about engagements with taxpayers, the technology we are talking about cannot work if those that it's made for understand and are able to use it. So under the engagements with our taxpayers, we have taken it a note further to put them also involved in the process and the preparation of these systems. Again, as a tax administration, we have enhanced our skill set for our staff in contemporary areas that we have identified of today. For example, international taxation, we have expanded our pool of staff, but also data analytics. When I talked about technology, technology sometimes serves the purpose of service delivery, but that's not the end. It also leads us to collect a lot of data. So what next? So with that data, we have tried to put up a pool of data scientists and data analytics to ensure that the data we collect also helps us in analyzing and making informed decisions going forward. And lastly, what I would want to say is that on the technology part, which has been discussed so much by even our previous senior presenters and former commissioners that have set the pace for many years, is that today a modern tax administration needs to design systems that are going to address the issues that they have. That is no longer a discussion. I think what now needs to be done is to say, what systems do you have on the continent? How can tax administration share? The cooperation that we talk about is not only on international transactions that are happening. The cooperation also is about how do African countries work together to share the experience, the systems, the achievements, the success stories that they have made. So, as someone said, we have a lot of data, we have collected a lot of data. It's only God that we can believe in, but the rest has to be in data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nuwenshuti. So, and I certainly do think it deserves a round of applause. What I'm hearing you say is there's a pathway to the how. You talk about some of the building blocks that need to be in place for DRM to really begin to rise to the promise of funding our development ambitions. You highlight that without the skills, we can't actually do it. Without an exchange of information where we're lifting best practice and extrapolating best practice, it makes it difficult to scale success. You mention the use of technology to address some of those inefficiencies, and what I'm hearing you say is that if we don't integrate technology intentionally, we're not going to be able to close leakages where they exist, but more than anything, to Dr. Eric's point, we're not going to be able to broaden the tax base in the first instance. So thank you for that additional layer that you've added to us. Mr. Jiwanji, let me come to you. Let's bring the UNDP voice into this conversation. There's been a lot of energy that's been generated around the possibility of DRM and financing development in particular. Are you able to share some of the early gains that UNDP has already begun to realize, that if you look at these gains, you are excited by the prospect of what they could achieve for the continent?
Thanks very much, Nazifa, and I also want to acknowledge His Excellency Muchanga and Dr. Eric for setting the scene so well, and fantastic live action in Rwanda, as we just heard from Commissioner General. Listening to the, I'll pick up a thread from Dr. Eric. You know, let's look at it as a resource mobilization strategy generally. I think we saw the global trends, the deficits, and particularly the challenges across the continent. In our work, we focus on looking at financing for development from an SDG lens and how that links to national development priorities. So we're not only looking at domestic resource mobilization from a quantum perspective.
Yes.
And so there are some estimates, a staggering 400 billion annually needed to achieve Agenda 2063 and the SDG targets. So it's a colossal amount of funding. But I think listening to the presentations, and I really appreciated Dr. Eric's proposed strategy of looking inward and some of the systemic work that we're hearing about in Rwanda. It's not just about the quantum, it's about the extent to which whatever revenue is mobilized, how it's deliberately applied to particular priority development issues and what are the systems around that. So I wanted to give that as a context to answer your question. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to applaud Ataf on its journey, the 15 years. But drawing a link to some of the charts that were presented by Dr. Eric, what we're seeing here through the Ataf kind of progression is a collective intelligence that you cannot ignore in the global scene. I mean, I think without this wealth of knowledge, experience, experimentation, confidence, capability, you know, the African continent is going to really struggle to how to say on the global agenda. Now, some of the early signs of success, I'm going to go more systemic because I think there are already signs of increasing domestic resource mobilization. But the real opportunity is that looking inward, and how do countries in the continent show themselves how they're not only mobilizing resources, but using them for development good. So one of the advantages of domestic resource mobilization is also the potential for behavior change. It's not just the amount of revenue streams. So for instance, a fuel tax, raising revenue, directly addressing pollution, but also has corollary health impacts. And so these are some of the opportunities we're looking for. So we work on financing for development. We work across 34 countries. Specifically, we have conducted, through the leaderships mainly of the revenue authorities, we've conducted these SDG taxation frameworks, which try to highlight these opportunities for domestic resource mobilization and other instruments. I'll just give some examples. So on taxation policy reform, Zimbabwe introduced a sugar tax that generated an additional $8 million in revenue. But it's what that revenue does. It was able to be directed towards addressing non-communicable diseases. But also, I think tax avoidance was raised earlier. So whilst we're flying the machine, raising revenues against those charts that we saw earlier, there's a lot of leakage. So we have a great partnership with Ataf and others, Tax Inspectors Without Borders, where we're working with a number of countries to plug those leakages. So just to give an example, in Nigeria, a tax audit program with the extractive sector helped to collect an additional 29 million, as an example. So there's pockets of hope. I just want to close by saying, yes, we do need to negotiate with the global stage. And Dr. Eric highlighted that, yes, there is a certain opportunity there, but it may not be enough. And so to really underline the point that really the opportunity that we're seeing across many African countries that we work with is actually inward looking and strengthening the systems around DRM. And finally, DRM, whilst it is the most substantive and secure source of financing, when you zoom out and look at all SDG needs, a lot of countries are
There's a microphone coming. I wonder whether it's a sign that the technical team is saying you've spoken for too much. Let's take your microphone away. It's happened to me a few times, Mr. Juwanji, so it's not about you.
I'll use that anyway as an opportunity to close. No, I just wanted to say that whilst domestic resource mobilization is going to be the pivotal strand of any financing strategy. There are many financing instruments that countries are experimenting with, innovative and otherwise. But that inward-looking point, if countries get that domestic resource mobilization strategy right, but deliberately link it to a development agenda, and preferably, and I'm not quite sure, I'd be interested to hear from the floor, preferably align taxation revenue with other instruments towards a particular agenda like climate change. And we're really interested in working in Rwanda, the recently launched climate change financing strategy, nature strategy. It'll be interesting to see how domestic resource mobilization is an integral part of that strategy. So thank you very much.
Mr. Jiwanji, I think that's excellent. And what we're hearing you say is that DRM is the means, it's not the end. And we've got to be able to ask the difficult question to say, what do those resources then go on and do? And be intentional about linking the resources that have been mobilized with the development agenda. And actually the metric we should be measuring is the outcomes in development and not necessarily just how much money has been raised. I was particularly interested on the point around behavior change as well, because that's where the sustainability of the DRM comes from. But Logan, let me come to the question that one of the points that Mr. Jiwanji ends on. He talks about we still need to negotiate on the global stage. So I want to bring this conversation around this tension on the global stage and the changing financial architecture globally back into focus in the conversation. In your view, how do African tax administrations, one, adapt their strategies so that they can enhance DRM, but at the same time retain their competitiveness so that they're able to attract investment? And the almost unsaid in this conversation is, whilst sort of leveraging tax incentives as well to do that. So I want to just bring you that broad tension and to say, can you help us think about that? But the second part of that question is, Mr. Jiwanji talks about a collective intelligence. I want to double click on that and to say, how do we then collectively influence tax policy at a global level?
Thank you so much. I think Dr. Eric's exposition clearly demonstrated the interconnectivity of global trade and how just the world of global commerce has changed. We cannot in Africa or in any tax world continue to collect tax administration in a bureaucratic administration where you're not going to build your tax base, you're not going to expand your tax base. And if you're going to, as Dr. Eric says, look inward for that mobilization, you're going to have to use new strategies and innovative strategies. And you're going to start to talk about knowledge, data, and intelligence. And you're going to talk about risk-based revenue collection, data analytics, technology, and trying to understand and analyze revenue and the economy differently. The current trend of tax administration do not invest in knowledge. It doesn't invest in intelligence. It doesn't invest sufficiently in technology. And those are the new areas that the global changes and the global architecture offers and brings, and that is where our money is going to come from. But our revenue will also come from optimizing existing streams. And I think we tend to look at the technology, we tend to look at the knowledge hub and the global architecture, yes. But what we found in, for example, our work in extractives, that we probably only collect less than 30% of what, in revenue, of what is really available in the extractive industry, which is in abundance on the continent. And in the work that we have done and in the big part of the 700 billion of support of this year alone has come from that sector. And we find that if you optimize both at the legislative, the auditing, the transfer pricing part of existing revenue streams, there's a lot to be found internally. And so it's a combination of modern strategy and optimizing the internal strategy. Part of that global architecture is what tax treaties, and Ronald spoke about his DTAs, what tax treaties offers you by virtue of knowledge and information. And then also the creation of tax certainty for your taxpayers. It is very important to understand and to adapt to the global economic change, and part of that is to understand the digital economy. Africa has a youth dividend, what we call a youth dividend. A big part, the majority of Africa's population are young people. Africa's commerce and e-commerce and trade has exponentially grown. It's about understanding what percentage of that economic growth is retained in the form of economic benefit and taxation within the continent. Also, it is important to undo a lot of the old extractive incentives, to look at the contracts, and to look at the non-transparent nature of the proceeds of those contracts. So again, a combination of unpacking the old, bringing in an innovation in the new. Corporate taxation represents between 30 and 70% of total revenue for most countries on the continent. So if that is where your revenue lies, that is where your investment must be. And so we think that multinational taxation and looking at audits, the illicit financial flows, policy and legislative elements thereof, and the collaboration with the big multinationals in terms of tax compliance, thin capitalization, high net worth individuals, are some of the strategic adaptations that will be required. So we in Ataf have developed a number of instruments to facilitate this, and this include supporting our countries with suggested standards and guidelines on the introduction of digital service taxation, electronic VAT, transfer pricing, thin capitalization, and a whole range of other products, training, and audit facilities that has increased their ability to collect this revenue. Maybe finally to say that part of participating in this battle for the allocation of taxing rights in this global sphere is to deal with elements such as in the modern economy, how do you deal with something like a definition of a permanent establishment where a digital company is not registered within your, and some of that innovation is something Nigeria introduced when it talked about a virtual economic presence. So those will be the type of innovations that we need to do. We need to understand what a continent like Africa, who is largely a market jurisdiction, offers to the digital businesses, and we cannot tax because they're not physically present, and therefore what are the alternatives to that? So those are some of the innovations I think we must bring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wharton. So what I'm hearing you say is, despite the complexities, therein lies opportunities as well, that innovating doesn't always mean only new. Sometimes it's going back to the existing, optimizing, as you've said. It's about being brave enough to really maybe even undo, as you've said, some extractive contracts that are really not benefiting the continent, but also, as you're saying, taking the lead from some of our own, like Nigeria, to think about our place in the digital economy and what that means in the form of taxation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to apologize in advance. We have to close the session because you have to have lunch. I think I'll also get into trouble if you don't have lunch. So I think there is so much more that could have been said in this conversation. I think we've scratched the surface of some of the key issues, but I know that those key issues are going to be further unpacked in the breakaway sessions and in the plenary sessions that will follow over the next 2 days. Can I ask at this point for you just to give my panelists a very big round of applause? A very big thank you to you too. I hope you've heard the applause that extends to you as well. Mr. Ward and Dr. Eric, we're going to leave you on the stage. Mr. Jiwanji and of course Mr. Niwen Shuti and I are going to descend. And this is what is going to happen. My promise is that we're going to lunch. But before we go to lunch, there is a little launch and a little signing of an important MOU that's going to happen, after which I'm going to ask you to please hold your seats so I can give you some instructions about where lunch is and what is going to be happening after lunch. Please don't worry, we'll make up for the time by not taking away from your lunch that has been very well deserved. So allow me to welcome Romeo back onto the stage to walk us through the launch of the next piece, which is DRM in Central Africa. Over to you, Romeo.
Merci beaucoup, Nozipo. Nous avons effectivement faim. Je crois qu'on va essayer d'accélérer la cadence. Nous allons lancer une publication très importante. On était en train de parler de mobilisation des ressources intérieures et le docteur Ogunleye et M. Ward vont participer au lancement d'un nouvel ouvrage, d'une nouvelle publication de l'Ataf, un outil qui va servir à nos membres précisément dans ce contexte. Ce n'est pas un livre physique, donc il n'y aura pas de remise de documentation, mais si l'équipe technique est prête, on va l'afficher à l'écran. Docteur Ogunleye, si je peux vous inviter à dire un ou deux mots sur cette publication avant la prise de photo.
Thank you very much. I think what I'd like to say is just to congratulate the two institutions, the African Development Bank and also Ataf, for the partnership that led to the production of these very interesting, innovative publications. Like I said earlier, the African Development Bank, we're looking at both soft and hard infrastructure as support to our regional member countries. And one of the panelists here talked about issue of knowledge, intelligence, and data. Knowledge is power, and it's absolutely important. So working with Ataf to come up with this publication that helps us to have a view of how countries are performing on taxation, tax policies, tax outcomes, and more importantly, like we said, the use to which the resources are put. It is indeed a great partnership, and I want to thank Ataf for working with us. Incidentally, I have my colleague here who is actually task managing this work, who may want to say one or two things from his seat about this very important publication. But the most important thing, like I said, I'd like to say is we look forward to similar partnership. What we do at the bank is to also support institutions like Ataf to be able to do more to benefit member countries. And we're happy to do this. My colleague Kalayu, would you like to say one or two things, please? Thank you.
Yes, very happily for 2 minutes.
No, thank you. Just to join Eric, again, congratulate Ataf for the partnership and productive engagement that we've had over the years. But I think this specific knowledge work is quite critical. We know that Ataf has been working on the Africa Tax Outlook for several years, and it's a great pleasure for us to work with Ataf and have that regional level publications. And I think this knowledge work is critical for the dialogue and for advancing African agenda at a continental and global level. So we'll continue to work with Ataf on knowledge and policy dialogue going forward. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais demander à M. Ward de dire 2 mots également avant de faire la photo.
This is an exciting project because it was one of the first sort of direct commissions that we received with the bank, and our colleagues Frank Mbuyamba and Dr. Majivanyika really enjoyed working on this project. and it's also the first of an inspired set of regional economic outlooks that Emeka Nkwanko, who leads our member services work and research work, wants to work on. The interesting part about the outlook process with this one and our flagship document is the collection of data in itself. The collection of data in our case is not just a simple collection process, because systems and information is not freely available everywhere. So it's about innovative ways of finding data, getting in the agencies to start working, and beginning to get legislation in place that allows for the information. So it's a whole process here that leaves behind quite an enabled revenue administration in the end. And the information that is gathered in this particular Central African project has been quite innovative and useful for the country. So we're very happy with the project, and thanks the African Development Bank for this cooperation. So thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Watt. Merci. Puis-je vous demander de vous avancer un tout petit peu pour la photo? Est-ce que le photographe est prêt? If you can please step forward for the picture. While we take the photo, can I please ask for assistance for the next activity, which is the signing of an MOU? Merci beaucoup. Pendant que mes collègues sont en train d'organiser la signature d'un protocole d'accord entre l'Ataf et le Centre d'études sur la fiscalité africaine, juste vous rappeler que cette publication que vous venez de voir est disponible déjà sur le site de l'Ataf. Donc vous pouvez y accéder en utilisant l'application que j'espère que vous avez déjà tous téléchargée. Sinon, vous pouvez également aller directement sur le site de l'Ataf et vous pouvez accéder à cette publication. Elle est disponible en français, en anglais et en portugais. Maintenant, nous allons passer à un événement très important. C'est la signature d'un protocole d'accord entre l'Ataf, le secrétariat de l'Ataf, et le Centre d'études sur la fiscalité africaine, qui est un centre qui fait partie du Bureau international de documentation fiscale. C'est un projet qui vise une collaboration entre les deux institutions en vue de la production de connaissances en matière de recherche, renforcement de capacités, élaboration de politiques fiscales et bien d'autres. Il va prendre une durée initiale d'à peu près 3 ans et ensuite, il y aura certainement une perspective de renouvellement. Pour cela, je voudrais inviter sur ce podium une fois de plus, le secrétaire exécutif de l'Ataf, M. Logan Ward, vous êtes très sollicité aujourd'hui, et Madame Belema Obuo-Foribo, qui est présidente du Centre d'études sur la fiscalité africaine. Si vous voulez bien venir sur le podium, s'il vous plaît. Et je voudrais aussi inviter ma collègue Leila Kitouyi, qui est manager responsable des partenariats avec les bailleurs et les partenaires stratégiques. Tel que je vous expliquais tantôt, en fait, notre partenariat avec le Centre d'études sur la fiscalité africaine est resté informel jusqu'à présent. C'est l'occasion pour nous de formaliser cela avec un cadre de coopération qui va gouverner nos échanges pour les 3 années à venir. Si vous voulez bien vous lever pour l'échange des dossiers. Je vous remercie, Nozipo. J'espère que je n'ai pas trop pris de ton temps. Quelques annonces avant la pause déjeuner.
Thank you very much, Romeo. Ladies and gentlemen, just 1 more minute of your time. Allow me to make a few announcements just to make sure that we are ready and prepared for our next piece. So we're going to break for lunch now. I believe that we've all received vouchers for lunch during this time. Please, can you double check the restaurant name on your voucher? The restaurants are not the same only because of space. So we are trying to allocate us across the facilities available. So please go to the restaurant that is written on your voucher. It's either the Auditorium restaurant, which is in the KCC side, or it's the Larder restaurant, which is on the hotel side. Might I also please ask you to please take your bags with you, because we're going to be turning this room around during lunch in preparation for our breakaway sessions. So please make sure to take all your belongings with you. Finally, on the breakaway sessions, to the technical team, can we please project on screen? What I'd love to bring to our attention are the different breakaways. So, the first breakaway, which is on taxation of high net worth individuals, is taking place at MH1. The breakaway on taxation and the informal sector is taking place at MH2. And the breakaway on health taxes is taking place at MH3. We are going to go to lunch until 3 p.m. The kind request is that we are in our breakaway sessions by 3 p.m. to give us 2 solid hours in those breakaway sessions, which will conclude at 5. Last announcement, for those who are already on their feet, please can you just bear with me. The last announcement is that there is a cocktail, a welcome cocktail at 5 p.m. just outside here in the same place where we had our tea and coffee earlier. And if you would like, completely voluntary, we have a movie night where we're going to be showcasing the Ataf at 15 documentary. We saw a little bit of a trailer today, but that's going to be kicking off here in the plenary at 5 p.m. So thank you very much. I hope you've taken a picture. Enjoy lunch, and please be in your breakaway sessions by 3 p.m. Thank you very much.